It'll be beyond him now, as it's been beyond them all night. How quickly things can change in football. Collingwood right the wrongs of the opening round with a 91-point demolition of Port Adelaide.
Alrighty, hello and welcome to the CREEDCAST. My name is Dave, and as always, thank you for joining us in this moment of mourning. It wasn't a nightmare; it did happen. Port Adelaide went down quicker than the HMS Hood did in the Battle of the Denmark Strait. Collingwood doing the Bismarck's work as they blew us out of the water. 21 goals, 10, 136 to 6-9, 45. Jamie, you had a cooking class and watched this on replay, which, by the way, is just the amount of work that goes into this podcast. As Jamie actually voluntarily watched this on replay. So tell me in great length, as to take up the entire episode and avoid the match, what was the cooking class like, and are you now as accomplished as your namesake?
Cooking class was a great time. Shout out to Aaron. It was actually my brother's birthday present, and I was his +1 because unfortunately his girlfriend, she has some allergies. I believe that's the reason why I was lucky enough to go, and the irony is not lost on me in regards to my name, and I made damn well sure not to bring it up on the night. Although the cooking class teacher did suspect Aaron and myself of being chefs. Well, she asked us afterwards, and I was like, hell no. Wouldn't that be just the world's biggest gimmick? But no, it was fantastic. It was fantastic not to stress over what was an abysmal game of football. And yes, I did watch the replay mostly today. And what I've got to say to a lot of people is it's much easier to digest without emotion and knowing what the end result inevitably is. Much like a win. I mean, we love watching a win on replay. I'm sure a lot of people listening do. But yeah, for the love of the pod and the name of the game in research, yeah, you know, got to be consistent, and it's not as bad. And generally, much like I'm sure the comparisons will come up throughout tonight's episode with the Brisbane game last year, I know a lot of people won't want to hear it, but there are some objective positives and some objective truths and whatnot to take out of it. But yeah, I'm sure we'll delve right into all of that as we go.
Yeah, the Brisbane one's an interesting comparison to bring up because that was the one that I was out and indisposed over in Los Angeles at a brewery when the Brisbane game was on, and I had to watch that one on replay despite having seen the result as it floated through and seeing all the reactions online and everything like that. So yeah, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to hear about the cooking class for 2 hours, we do have to talk about it. It's an interesting. We'll go through the line, like each line, in a little bit here, but I mean, it is funny. I was thinking about this over the course of the weekend since the game, and how we've been trepidatious going into the season, but we've been trying to, and with good reason. We hope and still believe, like, you know, hopefully going forward with good reason, been trying to find the positives despite there being some trepidation around Port fans and obviously the succession plan and the off-season moves with Dan Houston, and we'll get to Dan Houston a bit too as well. I felt a bit like, Clark Griswold in Christmas Vacation, in that, like, trying to plan for something going on, like he's trying to plan the perfect family Christmas and everything, just things start going wrong. And even though you've got the best intentions, like we do as a podcast, it's like the loss on the weekend felt like that night where everything goes to shit, and he's just trying to hold everything together. And we're on the podcast like we're going to have the happiest season since, you know, Alistair Lynch danced with Daryl fucking Wakeland. Like, it's just like, I feel like that now. I'm just like, we're at the threshold of hell. Like, holy shit, get me a Tylenol. But like, where you watched it without the emotion of watching it in the moment. I did text you earlier and I said it was kind of like halftime. I lost the emotion to it too, because and then it got exponentially worse after halftime. And I just sat there and groaned and drank beer. And my wife rang me, and as she woke up in Los Angeles, and all she got from me for an hour was just me just chugging back a couple of beers and groaning. And that was my experience with it. How did you feel just overall with the experience of it? Like, is where are your expectations now? Does it change anything for you, or is it just like this is just a blip, I guess?
Does it change anything for me? No. Like, I didn't expect a win. We have a terrible record at MCG against Collingwood. We're on average 3 years younger than the team that we played, which is huge in an AFL sense.
Mm.
We looked short of a gallop. Collingwood looked like they copped the criticism that we're copping this week. Prior to the game, like, there was a lot of things that didn't surprise me. We went back to old habits in some of our ball movement. I refuse to be overwhelmed and react accordingly to a round one loss. I would have much preferred it be a win. And yeah, doing this pod and dissecting the whole team, we do hope for the best, but you got to be pragmatic about it. I didn't expect to win. I did not expect to lose by that much, and that's not acceptable at all.
Mm.
What goes into that? Port Adelaide is a very boom or bust side. There's enough evidence to suggest that, a bit like Travis Head, if you're a cricket lover. More, it's either feast or famine. Thankfully, in Travis Head's case, it's been more feast over the last few years. And in regards to Port Adelaide, it's more feast than famine in regards to a win-loss sense. But when it's bad, it's bad. We all know that. The gap between our best and our worst is pretty big. But thankfully, in any given season, we see our worst a handful of times at most. I'm hoping Saturday isn't an insight into how the rest of the season is going to go. But there are some elements of the game, to me, watching it earlier, that would suggest that, not necessarily that it's not going to be a theme of the season, but I see 23 players who can all and have all played a lot better than they did on Saturday night.
Yeah, I echo that generally. I do have some legitimate concerns out of it, but then it's also like I need 4 or 5 weeks of need us to get, like, I mean, obviously the questions come out immediately, and
yeah, there's some structural
plans.
things that I'm concerned with and not happy with. Some of them are forced. Some of them are clearly chosen because that's the team that we picked to represent ourselves. But I think there's still things that we can adjust.
Mm.
To cut you off, sorry.
No, absolutely agreed as well. Yeah, obviously the big question of the weekend is obviously the succession plan in Cairn and all those things. And while I think there's some legitimacy to the idea that, whether the succession plan is the right idea, we're hoping it works, but it's like certainly, but it would also, all the talking heads talking about it, and certainly fans as well, and a lot of fans have legitimate criticisms as well, and we're not beating down on them. But if we went into the season kind of just okay, like we'll see how it goes, we can't immediately jump to sacking in the first week as well. Like, you need to at least, like, that
would be one of the weakest things a football club could ever do. And I know there's a lot of opinion about Ken and when he should or should have moved on. But making a call after 1 week, albeit we already know what's happening at the end of the season, it would still be a very weak thing to do.
Yeah. Because then you should have done it.
Yeah, there's a lot of like
4 or 5 weeks ago when you announced the succession plan, it should have just been done then. If you're going to go with the succession plan, you should at least give it a chance and not overreact to, as you said, a loss that we unfortunately are prone to at the MCG against Collingwood. The last 3 times against them over there have been, this one's worse than the other 2, but actually, as far as the gameplay evidence and everything that happened within the game, Collingwood has overwhelmed us and run us off the park each and every time.
Yeah.
This one was just, I think, aided a little bit by conditions. Obviously, we didn't turn up well enough, and we'll get into that once we get into the lines and stuff as well. But just overall, as a team, we just weren't prepared. The conditions, it was 32 degrees early in the game, they mentioned. It was greasy, slippery. That MCG deck is, over multiple games that I've watched there now, is just really slippy. Like, players are just going over when they shouldn't.
Yeah,
Collingwood obviously
it's always
handled it
frustrating
better.
to watch.
Yeah, geez, it's frustrating. And Willem Drew gets caught holding the ball, even though it's clear. Deck. That one frustrated me, especially when Lockie Schultz dropped it, picked it back up in a tackle like later on, and should have been called and didn't, and still side bottom gets a goal, and the commentators don't
Oh,
mention it.
yeah, that one
Yeah.
kind of stands out, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and especially watching back the replay, that I didn't watch a whole replay today, but I watched part of it, and I watched the Willem Drew holding the ball and having that Lockie Schultz went in the back of my mind. I went, like, what? Like, even the commentators were like, yeah, he doesn't get any grace for the fact that it was like a deck issue, and whereas later on Lockie Schultz doesn't even get any talk from the commentators at all. They were like, oh, look at him, like he gets a handball off, and this is like, yeah,
He's trying really hard, Lockie. Yeah.
after he dropped it in a tackle, which was the most like obvious example of what holding the ball is. But anyway,
Before,
we were
yeah,
prepared.
just to
Yeah.
sorry, just to jump in,
Mm.
I was you were talking about the succession plan before and talking heads and whatnot, and it's something that's been lingering in my mind since obviously Saturday night and the fallout of it, particularly the plethora of footy shows, sans a lot of analysis, to be honest, a lot of sensationalism. But my question to you and the listeners is, if Port Adelaide hadn't announced the succession plan, with it already being assumed by the mass, the footy public,
Mhm.
would the narrative be any different since Saturday night if had we lost in the same way? Say Ken didn't announce that he was stepping aside. The same people, in my opinion, would still be saying, oh, he should just hand it over now anyway, because he's in the last year of his contract and da-da-da-da-da.
Mhm.
Like, do you think it would be any different to what it is over the last few days? Because I don't.
Not really. No, it's just it more adds to the. I think the talking heads one. There is one. I'll answer the first part, and then I'll bring up an interesting thing. One, there's a few grains of interest in some of what even David King, who I like to mock at every opportunity, he had some grains of.
Oh, and he's really like, this is right in his firing line.
Oh, once he gets
he's
something on
chosen this
target.
topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to answer the question, yeah, no, you're right. The last few days have been. I mean, it comes right down to the signs are on the signs are on the signs on Port Road again.
I still won't believe that that's a Port Adelaide supporter until I see evidence
That
of.
happens so quickly.
Such...
I'm just like,
Yeah.
it just feels like get my tinfoil hat on, like, and there's an inside job from somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jet fuel doesn't burn tower beams. No, I'm not going to get into
Steel
that. It's going to get
beams,
us flagged. No. Yeah, there's just like, all the stuff that's happening, the talk on social media, it's all the same as it was after the Brisbane loss, after the Western Bulldogs prelim. It's all the same cycle of shit again. It's just, it is interesting watching
Geelong qualifying final.
Yes, sorry.
Sydney preliminary final.
I drank and jet lagged that one away from my mind. The grains of interest that I've had from some of the talking heads is because they're talking about it now as far as the succession plan goes. And David King kind of talked about the subconscious mindset of, and I do find it interesting talking about how teams generate a winning culture in that that you've got to have complete buy-in, you've got to have everyone on the same page. And that is probably the one thing that's been in the back of my mind as the season, and we talked about it when the succession plan was announced, like if everyone can be on the same page and we're all good with it, then it'll work okay. Like there's been instances of decent plan, of this working, but it is also that interesting thing that we are genuinely we played in a prelim last year. Like a lot of succession plans kind of come in a, like we're building again and we're kind of succession planning in this technically while we're in the window. Now, you and I might think we're just outside that window a little bit now as we regenerate a little bit, but we are in a succession plan at a different time than a lot of clubs are, although, Collingwood won a premiership shortly before they changed over. So maybe. Yeah. But he talked about that, some players might just be operating at 98, 99%, and they don't know it because that 1% and 2% is subconscious. But if there's if there's a little bit of stress in the mind or just unknown about what's the future of Port Adelaide as Port Adelaide players, if that's kind of just in the ether out there for the squad, what that does to the team. And I'm not saying that I don't have any answers or if I agree or disagree with it. I just find it interesting, a thing that I've been kind of just chewing on in my mind over the last few days. Because I think he mentioned that in the immediate post-match on Fox Footy, watching after the game, and that just stuck in my brain as I was a few beers deep at that point and just trying to work out what had gone wrong, like the shell shock that I had and posted on Instagram and Twitter about. That's kind of the interesting part of it to me. But as far as your question goes, it's all pretty much the same. Otherwise, it's just some of those little things, that nuggets that come out from some people. And as I said, I'm not certainly a David King believer, and not a hater either. I think because he's one of those ones like Ken Corns and all that put their opinion out about everything. There's sometimes they have stuff you disagree with, and that's their job. And certainly it provides us a talking point. But I found that one interesting. And for all his media stuff, he was a player too. So even if I don't always agree with them, I do like hearing the opinions of guys that had a long, lengthy playing career, and he's one like Ken Corns that reached the ultimate success as well. So they do know what it takes as a squad, and that is probably the one thing that I look at the performance on the weekend. It was just so apathetic. There was a lot, and again, we won't know until there's a sample size of the next 3 to 4 weeks.
That was going to be one of my next points.
Yes, exactly, and that's why I'm not jumping to. It needs to go right now because we made this bed. We need to line it at least for them. But if it got to halfway through the season and we were really, really struggling, I'd be like, well, you might as well let Josh Carr take over the reins if we're out of finals content. Like the worst case scenario.
For me, that just is a no-brainer. Like, I don't know why. Like, obviously, that question would be posed to people involved. And Koshi went on Eddie's podcast and he said that wouldn't happen, but it's just a no-brainer in my opinion. Like,
and
why wouldn't it happen?
Is something behind the scenes that if it goes the worst case scenario, I don't know, there's the facetious ones on Twitter that say Ken's greedy and all about money and he wouldn't walk away. But I do genuinely wonder if behind the scenes they're like, if this doesn't go, then Ken will do I will, amicably fall on my sword, so to speak.
Fall on my sword, that's the phrase, one thing I would say is that considering that we have announced a succession plan and there's been criticism of it, losing in round one and in that magnitude is definitely not the right way to start a football season. It definitely adds fuel to the fire. But now, like, you talk about Kane Corns and whatnot, and I've heard it from a few other people in the media that, like, apparently now Ken has been sacked, which is news to me. Obviously being facetious, but apparently, it's not that he's stepping aside; it's that he's been sacked and he has to coach out the last year of his contract, knowing that he's been sacked and whatnot. And that's the type of sensationalism that. I kind of noted before. I'm pretty sure if you ask the club, like, no one's been sacked. Like,
if he's been sacked, he's coming to the end of his contract. He's not being renewed. There's a big difference. As sacked is when you get told your services are no longer required while you're in a job that you don't want to leave, or you've got a contract or whatever. So it is funny. It's just that's probably the worst case. Like as you mentioned, the worst loss we could have, not hoped for, but the worst loss you could have feared,
expected.
To bring up these questions, because that was always my fear. And that's why I said when we were on Eddie's podcast and when we were talking about on our multiple podcasts leading into the season, that I just wanted to see a good competitive effort against Collingwood. Something we could see. If you look at Melbourne losing to GWS on Sunday. It's all positive out of them. They debuted. They had some good debutants. I think 5 or 6 debutants. They played well. They lost in a close one against the GWS side that everyone sees as a top 4 fancy. And obviously, by being a top 4 fancy, you're a premiership fancy. So Melbourne kind of had this honourable loss, so to speak. And so there's nothing. That's what I kind of wanted, and then we just got the complete opposite. It's just the worst case scenario for us as Port fans, and ones that want to try to have an objective mindset towards this, because it is a weird situation to be in, this whole succession plan thing. But it is the worst case scenario from week one is everything pouring down on us, and the fact that what's even more crazy is that watching the shows earlier the start of this week, Carlton had the most unimaginable loss in modern times on Thursday night. They lost the unlosable basically, and they gave themselves a 41-point head start into that unlosable match, and then still lost.
That's correct.
And we've still made ourselves probably the
talking point.
Yeah, because the Carlton one is just like it's kind of like, oh well, it was, we've made it. We're still the talking point. Yeah, Freo, who have been flag mantle in preseason, also lost terribly, but again, we're still the talking point. It is partly because of the succession plan as well. Justin Longmuir is in an interesting contract situation as well with how they've restructured his, but we're still the talking point, which is what just the worst case scenario, and it's what we've got to kind of dissect this game with that kind of in the background, which is what's frustrating. And then even going forward to this week, we're going to preview the Richmond game at the end of this episode, and we're going to have to still talk about this stuff. But and unfortunately, it's going to be a fact of this season every week, and that's what one of the talking points that have come up that I do agree with is that we've made a rod for our back, and the fact that we are going to be microanalyzed at every turn because of the situation we're in. But Port also would have known that going into it, and they're well aware. And I think Ken, even in his 10-15-minute press conference today, made mention of it. He kind of said, it's hard to avoid, and he chuckled and said, "I'm in Adelaide." Like,
Well, and I appreciate that he did do the first press conference this week. Although, like, Chad Corns spoke to the media yesterday, although that's they do like unfilmed press conferences and filmed press conferences. That's probably more where I'm getting at.
Yes, yeah.
But Ken fronted up, and I would have expected him to. But yeah, it is interesting. Like AFL football, obviously, there's been a lot of people on social media, particularly ones who use it as their daily diary, obviously waxing lyrical about the situation, Port fans and otherwise. But I'm probably talking about Port fans. But it always amazes me how insular people's memory is, or how forgetful people can be from season to season. Like, we're playing in a competition where Hawthorn and Brisbane both started the year dismally last year. Put the succession plan to one side, the topic of it, or else we'll go crazy, because much like everyone else, we're going to be talking about it all the time, I imagine. But Brisbane, who were the eventual premiers, started the season dismally last year. Hawthorn started 0-5. I was there to witness us beat Sydney by over 100 points during last year. Obviously, it wasn't round one, but it was still shocking. The team that ended up making a grand final, and yes, they eventually got belted in the grand final, but it just amazes me how little people remember of all the outrageous things that go on in a football season. And obviously, round one always gets blown out of proportion. Always, forever and a day, win or lose, results get blown out of proportion because we're involved in that circus now, and the accredited footy media, they've been hanging for some football to talk about and to discuss. And again, there's an oversaturation of it. So, the round one is like crack to everyone.
Yeah. Like everyone's got blue balls and need to just go.
They've got that final release. Yeah. They've hit the vinegar stroke and cha-ching. But I've always said that the football season doesn't actually start for me until round 6. I'm never going to get carried away with a round one loss, much like I wasn't carried away with a round one win last year against West Coast, where a lot of the same people who use social media as their daily diary to criticize us because we didn't win by more against West Coast on a hot day in round one last year. So again, that doesn't excuse the final margin. That got out of hand on Saturday night. That was quite ridiculous. But we should probably move on to talking about the game, and there are some notes either way that contribute to some of that stuff.
No, absolutely. Yeah, the game again, the score 21-10, 136 to 6-9-45. Cursed to score. Um, yeah, a point to make before we get into it, and I think probably start with the defensive side because that's where the ball spent most of the fucking time anyway. Um, I'm sure you've seen it, and I'm sure you've got it in front of you as well. The X score kind of speaks to just how easy it
Right,
was for.
I didn't. Yeah, I was the one that brought it up. Was it last week or when we did our
Yeah, yeah,
patron episode? I'm
yeah.
feverishly bringing it up now.
No,
Continue.
X score. Collingwood obviously scored. Well, they scored 136, but an X score of 135. Obviously, rush behinds aren't counted. Their expected score was 110, or just shy of 111. So they exceeded their X score by 25 points.
Mm-hmm.
Scored 45, expected score of 62. So still a pretty comfortable loss, but it kind of, I think that speaks to just how, and it's one area I'll
Out of hand.
out of hand it got in the
God.
second half because it actually wasn't. It, we got within 2 goals at the end of the first quarter, and then we again there was a little bit of defensive calamity, and I think it was the last goal of the first quarter was when Jeremy Finlayson kind of just stuck his leg out like a goalkeeper, like when the ball was grubbing past and didn't
Yeah.
quite catch it, and they score right at the death, and so they get 3 goals up at quarter time. I think they were up by 30 odd at half time. Just scrolling down to my score, trailing by 34 at half time. So starting to get a little rough there, but I think that again blew out a little bit towards the end of the quarter. Like we was kind of hanging in. It wasn't terrible, and then it's just the white flag went up in the second half, which I have
Yeah, well,
critiques about. I think that was that was one of where the CREEDCAST and the accounts the Creed. It's like one of those things is if you've
yeah.
exhausted all and to be objective, we don't know what the conditioning and everything going into the game and the conditions themselves. Like everyone looked pretty gassed, and that's a critique to have.
Fuck yeah.
That's more a
Particularly in the
critique
last
to have.
quarter.
Yeah, that's a critique I do have for the conditioning for the game. I can't. If they they might have actually exhausted every effort they had available to them on that day based on the conditioning going into the game. This is all
Yeah.
getting into the weeds of things, but yeah, it did just purely just watching it looked pretty terrible. The heavy legs and everything, whilst Collingwood on the same deck, and yes, they had the benefit of playing last week, but they looked full of run and full of vigor, and
Mm.
it just didn't look like.
Well, and they were old and slow
Yeah,
after their first game.
Yeah, and it's
Again, just some
sidebottom
points that
smacking
are
goals.
reverberated.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
now it's interesting. A week is definitely a long time in football, and this is more an overarching comment and a bit of analysis though before we just touch on the defense because they were under siege.
uh-huh.
But you mentioned out on their legs and like conditioning and whatnot, and the conditions whether they played a part. But the overarching thing that I saw across the whole game was poor disposal or
Yeah.
poor decision making leading to poor disposal,
Mm-hmm.
which eventuated in critical turnovers. We
Mm-hmm.
all know, or I assume everyone knows because you can't really escape all the analysis and criticism of Port Adelaide's game, but 99 points from turnover, I think was
Yep.
the statistic in the end. But it's just it's
Insane numbers.
unexcusable but unfounded. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I mean, you take half of that off the score, that's still a loss, but you level that up,
Mm-hmm.
positive and negative, you to a net, minor loss, or you even it up. That's a huge chunk of their score
Mm-hmm.
that they benefited from. Very critical turnovers, some poor ball handling, which can happen in round one. The commentators kept laughing. Like it seems like a bit of a Darwin football match for those of you who've ever watched any NTFL. It's very much played on the ground predominantly due to the slick conditions. But like yeah, and because I say this before because it is overarching on every line. There was just some critical turnovers that, and when you're in the attacking frame of mind as a teammate, and your teammate turns it over, particularly in critical spots, you're out of position and you're having to double back the other way. That takes a lot out of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an excuse, because we need to be better at a disposal when not under pressure. Like, unforced errors need to be reduced dramatically. But also,
there's even one that Aaliyah kicked, like, that just floated. Like, it just and
selling, like handballing to mates in traffic, decision making leading to poor disposal, leading to critical turnovers. It takes it out. If you spend most of your day defending, you're going to be fucked. And we saw that on a hot night, hot, humid night, when you're continually trying to defend turnover. And I mentioned in one of our preseason shows, the statistics show that the teams who win the premiership are the best teams at A, defending turnover, and B, benefiting from their turnovers. And Saturday was a very big lesson in what can happen if your gameplay and your game plan results in many, 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 many critical turnovers that lead to much better looks at goal for the opposition.
Yeah. And everything we've been told leading into the season about the game plan is that there is the chance of turnovers that we've got to make sure we, there's not too many of them. And unfortunately on Saturday night, it was 79 turnovers to 66. So minus 13 on turnover. And then just the running power that Collingwood executed on the night versus our, again, heavy legs, the conditions, whatever it was, we just didn't have the power. You need to, that is the thing though, with that game plan, is like you need to have the ability to try to defend on some of those turnovers at least, and try to, because 99 points is just an unforgivable number to give off of. If you're going to turn the ball over that much, you need to have a way to defend it. But you
need to mitigate the risks involved in
at least some
attacking game plan.
And it just didn't happen.
That's exactly right.
But again, the conditions, it's not like we're making excuses, and I'm hypercritical of what I saw on Saturday night, but you do have to be objective and say this. It wasn't exactly footy weather as far as what these players, and particularly in round one, and Collingwood had got the rocket up them, and I think you even met.
And they brought pressure like they got the rocket up them, both externally and internally. And credit to them, they came to play much like they do. And in saying that, that first quarter, you mentioned, what was it? We ended up a few goals down at quarter time because of that late goal, which came off of
21
poor decision making or a turnover.
Yeah.
I think the majority of that, I thought we came with effort in the first quarter, but effort only got us so far when you're continually turning the ball over. And I mean, letting Membry fucking kick 3 goals in the first quarter just about says it all. Like, we went through the lines we did our preview earlier in the week, and then we did our team selection episode on Patreon on Thursday night, and we went through the lines, and we were hopeful that if everyone stuck to the assignment, that we would give ourselves our best chance, and it just didn't happen. Mostly in my opinion, through disposal and decision making. And when like I said, when you're continually defending all match turnovers, you get fucked. You're gassed.
I mean, we'll talk about defense for a minute here before, because I think the defense will translate into the midfield and just the middle of it, because that's kind of where a lot of the turnover happened, was off halfback and into the midfield. It didn't even really get into the midfield a lot at times. But just on the defensive side of things, I thought, we just got beaten badly. And a shout out.
They're hiding to nothing.
Unfortunately, I'll bring up my watch list, which I hate to do it.
I think we've got the same one.
Yeah, I assume Lockie Jones.
Oh, and we and I've been flying the Lockie flag for the preseason. Everyone listening will know that. And if
like, I'm bringing him up because he had a bad night, and this is the kind of stuff he's unfortunately, when he makes mistakes, they're always just, I don't know, like, is he the Darwin Newton?
They stick out.
Team? Like, it's just like when he misses, it's just like way worse than anyone else. Just 2 calamitous errors in a minute or 2 of play as well, which like compounded the impact of it. But he wasn't alone in that like he was actually in position at least for the mistakes to happen, which is
Yeah,
because a
yeah,
lot of the time the ball just went past a few players, and it was between him and Finlayson for my watch, but I didn't want to quite throw Finlayson in there yet because I think again his role will be bettered by a better effort in the middle of the ground as well. His role isn't to be the last ditch lockdown defender, unfortunately, at the moment. Lockie Jones is meant to be, we're hoping to be a part of our back six for the long term. So it's just his preparation for and again, it could have been slick because he tried to take a handball and he looks like he's looking to dispose of it before he had it, and maybe the slickness of conditions got to him there. But
yeah.
he
He slightly ran under the ball to drop that mark early
yes.
as
And
well,
Lukosius had done
which
that
he
about
wasn't
5
the only
years ago.
one.
Yeah, Lukosius did it when we were actually a chance. We were going forward, and Lukosius came up was like half forward into the middle of the ground. Yeah, he
Hmm.
overran one that should have been an easy overhead mark for him, and he just overran it, and it turned around and went down the other way. And I'm pretty sure Collingwood scored. So there's lower profile examples of what Lockie Jones did. It's just unfortunately Lockie Jones one stuck out because both of them ended up in goals, and and
Yeah,
credit to the team for getting around him. And I still have high hopes for his future. It's just unfortunately he's immediately put, and my watch list is not more for his form. It's just like actually mentally how he goes forward dealing with a high profile moment. But again, we lost by 91 points, so it's not at all his fault. Not like it happened in a
yeah,
close game, but yeah, it's
yeah.
just again, Lockie Jones such an intriguing figure for me because he has the body, he has the skill, he does have the skill set at his best. It's just he keeps
100%.
unfortunately getting into these moments where he makes the mistake in a high profile situation,
Yeah, I
and again
think what did
two
he
two
get?
in a
4
minute.
disposals on the night before he got subbed off.
Yeah,
Uh, um,
75% efficiency, like not bad.
so 3 effective disposals. But what I was going to say
He
is
only
though,
had
when
two
he did,
clangers for the night. Like there's people had more clangers on the night. It's just he had two of the most high. The two he
he
had
had
were
few disposals.
yeah,
Yeah, there was a disposal. I think he spotted someone up with a delicate kick that I appreciated. And again,
yes,
it's a little window into what he can do. The thing for me in regards to Lockie Jones is, yeah, he's prone to, uh, a few of these games a year. What you want to see now that he's crossed the 50 game marker is you want to see these games being fewer and far between, because we've both agreed that he had a few breakout games last year, although he had one of these type of games against St Kilda at home was one that was noteworthy for dropped marks, which again, I don't think is a characteristic of his game as a whole. But you want these games to be few and far between. So now that he's had one in round one, it's it's a little bit of pressure on himself to make sure that the next real big block of games aren't as dire from a personal
yeah,
performance point of view.
yeah. No, absolutely agreed. Otherwise, the defense, I liked Elia's game early. He just the ball just
Yeah.
kept on coming. Like he was putting himself in a position to intercept, and he was really trying to generate the offensive, like the turn to offense quickly as well. Um, just didn't get much help because he'd do it and then it would come right back. He had a few, like again, like everyone, a few slippery hands moments, but for me, Alia looks ready to be the key pillar of this and looks in good form already. It's just again, just the ball kept on coming over him
Yeah,
time and time again,
he
and he
needs
needs,
help.
yeah,
He needs help around him and he needs help up the field,
hmm
which
yeah.
is a pretty
He needs to know he's got an
like
outlet, and I just don't know if he knows where that outlet is based on the small sample size we've seen
yeah.
so far. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I thought he started the game fairly well as
mm,
well, much like how I honestly believe the team did from an effort point of view. There's been a lot of obviously comments to the opposite. But again, I watched it without emotion today, so which I'm sure, like, who else is going to fucking watch a loss if they're not recording a podcast? That's what we get the benefit of doing. But yeah, Aaliyah, I did think I, and even Finlayson to a point, I think they're spoiling when they were given the opportunity when it wasn't in complete chaos. I
mhm.
thought from a spoiling point of view, uh, Yeah, they acquitted themselves fairly well, particularly more weighted. When I say fairly well, obviously more weighted to the first half. Because I've got like at the top of the turnovers, like the effort kept us there and thereabouts. We just couldn't fucking score. And we'll get to the midfield and the forwards, which that comes off of the back of.
Mm.
But I mean, yeah, like you mentioned that late goal in the first quarter when we were just hanging on, and their goals mainly came from turnover. Late in the second, like it was still struggling to score on our behalf. But then Elliot, I thought clearly held a lead with 2 minutes to go in the second quarter. And I think what were we? I think maybe we were a
Yes,
few goals
yeah.
down at that point.
And they kind of put
And
it on.
he gets a mark in the pocket, and he just pushes that margin even further out to half time. And um, yeah, it just kind of foreshadowed the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Like we were hanging in there, and look, we didn't deserve to be in front by any stretch,
No.
but we were hanging in. And if some of these late junk time goals, which that one in particular, I thought was a bit harsh in the second quarter, particularly on Aaliyah, like he's getting himself in the right position. But if a guy's holding your arm and then pushing you out of the contest, and they still get paid the mark, like there's not
And
like
the
what can you
commentators,
do?
of course, were like, I think if I remember it
I think there was a
correctly,
bit of a hold there. Yeah.
yeah, but then they were kind of like, oh, it did happen.
Yeah.
If it was the other way around, it'd be like, how dare you? But yeah, um, yeah, I was just they're kind of like, oh, it's just smart football or whatever. I don't know. There was some talk of the hold, and I thought there was someone just being like, oh, that's Jamie Elliott's. He's a smart footballer. Come on, just call a spade for once for me.
Yeah. Look, and we've mentioned Lockie Jones kind of running under the ball a little bit. I thought
Happened a few times from
the
a
defense as a whole, while they were under siege for most of the game, so you give them a bit of grace for that.
Mhm.
I I still think, from a structural point of view, and then from just basic footy skills point of view, like I thought Bergman was slightly off. He ran under one or two balls, like. Logan Evans tried, but he was just a bit off
Mhm.
in terms of his execution or decision making. Like decision making is, yeah, I'll keep bringing that up. Um, I thought Farrell was very good early in his role.
Mhm.
When they were banging on about Houston, obviously racking up disposals early in the piece. I thought Farrell was doing a fairly not maybe not an equal amount of work on our side of things, but I thought he was definitely holding his own in his role,
Mhm.
particularly early. But they copped it, the defense, and I do have to stick up for Finlayson. And I've been one of the people who I've mentioned it on this show that if he's playing down back for the whole year, it means something is seriously wrong,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Yes, he's tall. Yes, he played as a defender very early on in his GWS career, but he's been a forward for how long? I don't even know when his debut was. For the high majority of his career, he's been a
Yeah.
forward. And now being thrust into the defense late in the preseason, you can't expect a guy to just have those innate capabilities that a defender have, or the just that second nature of where do I need to be at every single moment in this game, particularly when you're playing a game of chaos and your line that you're contributing to is under siege. Um, he's been put there as a band-aid measure, and we spoke after the St Kilda game about how preseason match that is,
Mhm.
about how terrible they were. And sure, it made him look good because he is ideally a loose player in general. And from a defensive point of view, it allowed him to be loose around the pack and rebound and use his disposal, which I think is one of his key attributes.
Yeah.
Uh, but sure, his body language it leaves room for improvement a lot of the time. I hate to single him out from like a defensive point of view because he's filling in,
Yeah.
so to speak. Sure, you pick there, you've got to play the role, but expecting him to be some savior for us while some troops are out in that regard is a bit unfair, I think. I don't think he had as terrible a night as what some of the pundits or people in review would make you believe. Him, like everyone on the field, have room for improvement. And I don't want to hang him out to dry based on one game in a role that he's by and large unfamiliar with.
Yeah, a lot of the efforts, because he got keyed in on I think on the couch. I think targeted him a little bit for one of their little segments for just, I don't know who it was, talking about are they playing for Ken, and obviously it was with the preface of the succession plan talks, and just like pictured, like highlighted him with the little graphics that they do and his body language on a ball that was coming, on a turnover that he's been.
And he was kind of stuck on the halfback flank.
Yes, yeah. But then in that vision, and they're kind of like, he's kind of in no man's land. He's half going forward, half going back, and he's not really actually affecting the play because he doesn't know where to be. But then in that vision, you can see a bunch of other Port players that aren't running that hard either. So, and
that's those innate aspects of a defender's game that I was kind of alluding to.
Yeah,
is you can imagine a Zerk Thatcher or even a Radigalia who, look, isn't a gifted defender, we could say, but he's got a lot more experience recently in that facet of the game. You can imagine people like that probably going, oh shit, like I actually need to be closer to them rather than trying to pressure here. And that's what I mean. Like at this point in time, I'm happy to like give him a bit of leeway in that regard.
Particularly in a game
because I think,
a lot of people were stuck in no man's land. Like he wasn't alone at all.
A lot.
And I can't remember who brought it up, but it might have been actually Kane Corns did it. And maybe a good segue in talking about the midfield. And if you have anything else to bring up, go for it. But like Jason HORNE-FRANCIS had some efforts on the night, and we like, contrary to Jeremy Finlayson, who is a scapegoat for a lot of Port fans, and there is reasons at times for that, but overall, like he does get a little bit too much stick than that he doesn't deserve as well at times. Again, his effort, like he's just one of those ones that his body language is a little bit lackadaisical, and if he does show his frustration, he probably wears his heart in his sleeve a little bit more than some do, and he also plays. He's often in some. At the moment, the last 12 months, he's been in a little bit more thankless roles as well. And on the weekend, he was just probably the most obvious example of the malaise that was throughout the squad. But there was some, obviously we'll get to our votes later on, there's some that were lone soldiers in the efforts to try to curtail the Collingwood onslaught. But Finlayson was just one of those ones that looked the most obvious, but there was a lot of tired legs out there. But yeah, Jason HORNE-FRANCIS had some efforts on the night that left a bit to be desired as well, and that's where it gets a little bit frustrating when you look at a midfield group. That when you look at their numbers, they accumulated a lot. Some did play okay. But overall, the role of, and even I think Ken was asked today, like, did you miss Butters? And like Ken kind of laughed and was like, yeah. Obviously, but we don't have him at the moment. Like he answered it very well, because it's also like it's a really hard question to answer, because yes, it's Zach Butters. He's widely known as one of the top 10 players. Like all those top 10 player polls that were done by players or media or anything in the preseason, Butters was in the top 5 in most, or 6 or 7. So yeah, obviously you missed him, but he's not available. So what do you do? But then the effort
you got to make do.
Yeah, Zach Butters doesn't turn around a 91-point result, nor does Brandon Zerk Thatcher or anyone else that's not available to us right now, Todd Marshall, or whoever you want to pick. If our squad is fully fit and we go out there and put in the effort we did on the weekend and they execute the game plan the way we don't execute the game plan, we're still losing by maybe it's 70 points instead of 91. I don't know what kind of difference a fully fit squad makes, but the ultimate point is, we didn't execute, and a lot of it came down just that the engine room just not doing the work it needed to do. Yes, there was a lot of the numbers actually. I was fucking flabbergasted when I saw he won the stoppage and we're pretty good at clearance and
clearances.
And Jordan Sweet, some of his tap work actually was really good. It just went to fucking Collingwood players instead of Port players.
You bring up Sweet, so I've got to jump in. I've actually got Jordan Sweet as my spotlight for this week
Love
because
that.
I think, like you mentioned, the perception would be that that's ruck work, right? It's not always going to go in your favor. But I thought that he was one of very few, if not the only person who won his position on the night.
Mhm.
He finished with 30, was it 36 hitouts? And
Yes. Yeah.
I think that was more than the two major ruckman that Collingwood used combined. I thought he plugged away for the whole 4 quarters. He's not the most gifted person on our team. He's not the person that we rely on to win us games of football. Not that you should rely on one person. I love Zach Butters, like you just mentioned.
Mhm.
But yeah, I thought in terms of people winning their position, he probably put up the best case out of anyone, maybe except for Rosie. But although they had some decent output from their midfielders too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned Sweet, and so I just wanted to jump in and put him up there in lights a little bit because I thought, yeah, when there were a lot of players left, a lot to be desired. I couldn't really fault him from a ruckman point of view, and he even got himself involved in a lot of handball chains and passages of play akin to a midfielder, which I think he enjoys. And I think it's even Hutto mentioned on the call that he's one of the better ruckmen in those kind of extra facets of the game in the competition, which is a credit to him.
Yeah, he works incredibly hard, and he got a goal and had a really nice
Yeah,
celebrated quite well. And one of those things when he kicked the goal, I thought, no, he's got a decent record at Port now of kicking goals. I think I talked
when
about,
he gets the chance.
yeah, I think I talked about was in the St Kilda preseason game how like sweet his kick was from like
Oh yeah, it was
that shoulder that
yeah,
bent
using the
in,
conditions.
yeah, bent in beautifully, and so he has a fairly good knack for. So he does have that. He's a goal. He can be a goal scoring ruckman, but yeah, as you said, like he works considering his body composition, and being a tall ruckman and the trials that come from just having to move around a body of that size. He does get involved as much as he possibly can, and to good effect in midfield work and everything. So he likes to apply pressure. He loves the contest, which I love. I love about him as well. He's a Port Adelaide player, and obviously we all love him even more because we know he was a Port Adelaide fan growing up, and he's playing for his boyhood club. So there's a lot of that goes into it. But yeah, it's a good spotlight to make because he, despite the result, he settled any, and who knows how the season goes, but just with the small sample size, any fears I have of like him, just being a little flash in the pan last year, he played that game against Collingwood at the MCG pretty damn well and did what we expect from Jordan Sweet as we know him now. And that makes me excited for the rest of the season as far as his work goes. Yes, there's a lot of spot fires around him, but as far as he goes, like suddenly, like it's just, again, I think I said to you in preseason at some point, it's funny that the ruck position, which was such in flux more or less from when Paddy Ryder left, even Scott Lysett had some good times, but it always felt like he was like laboring a little bit all the way through.
Yeah, yeah.
It is nice that now the ruck position feels a little bit more settled, even if we've got a few. Yeah.
It just felt like, sorry, with
say,
Lysett, it just felt like he was there to bash up the other ruckman.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it ended.
Yeah. And look, I love Scott Lysett given like the showdown moment when he kicks the goal, and I love the fact that he
the push,
just like turn around and find a pros player to push like straight after a good goal. I'm like, that's fucking showdown rivalry. Like, get that in, like, hook it to my veins. But yeah, it's just like as far as actually having a ruckman that does all the stuff that you want them to do, like a high level Australian Football League ruckman. It's nice that this game just showed me Jordan Sweet's ready to hit 2025 with that vigor that he has from last year, but also with the confidence knowing, I think you've mentioned at times, the confidence knowing he's now the man. He doesn't have to fight for the spot. Although you always have to make sure that you're keeping your standards up, but he seems like the kind of bloke that's going to do that and also flourish now knowing he's got the spot. So outside of that, it's an interesting midfield because it's the same things we've talked about at times, like and you mentioned at the top of the show, the feast and famine of Port Adelaide football is often built around what our midfield is able to execute. Like, we both love Jason Horne-Francis, and he's going to be a port player, an incredible port player, an incredible possible Brownlow medalist going forward in this competition. But it felt like I didn't notice him much for the first half and into the second. Like, it's rare that you have Jason Horne-Francis going to have games that he has less. I'm just looking at his disposals now. And I'm like, well, he had more disposals than that game that he got 3 Brownlow votes for. But
it's like the benchmark, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like what you notice from him. And this was one of the most unnoticeable games I've had, like Jason Horne-Francis has had at Port Adelaide, which is disappointing after he's had the best preseason of probably almost any Port player. Like, for me, what I watched, and it'd be interesting to see if you saw the same thing, but because me watching live and having the emotionality involved, I just remember at one point going, I just haven't noticed him enough. Like, obviously you do notice him because anytime he's on the screen, he is that. You've got Russell Ebert in your background right now, and for those watching on YouTube, and Travis spoke obviously with a milestone coming up, or a milestone on the weekend, and then another milestone coming up this weekend. We'll touch on that later on, but Boak and Ebert are 2 players that were just obviously noticeable anytime you saw them. Not that I lived through Ebert's time, but having watched plenty of highlights and whatever. And Jason Horne-Francis is one of those players that you notice him as soon as you see him, but he didn't have that same tangible impact that we see. Even in some bad games, he usually has a little moment, like the Geelong qualifying final last year. He had his moment, but this one, it felt like, and his malaise kind of felt like he's, and it's not just him, but a lot of numbers there, but not a lot of joy, and a lot of that comes from those intangibles of what we need to do in that game plan of turnover and defending the turnover if it happens, but also actually executing the game plan going forward. We just had no structure. There was everyone always felt like they were out of position. Everyone was immediately under pressure. The handball, because we want to handball chain a bit more through the middle or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was never, whereas Collingwood always had an option, whether it be by foot or by hand. They always had options. They always had space. But yet, and a lot of that comes down to Collingwood's pressure. But we can be a good pressure side. We have been in recent times. So just that lack of execution in the middle from a lot of players that, a midfield that contains former Brownlow medalist Ollie Wines, future one, and Jason Horne-Francis, Rosie, Willem Drew, Travis Boak getting through there as well. Like, there's a lot of good names and numbers in there. Even if you take out, like, obviously the missing Zach Butters, there's not many excuses for that midfield to perform so like, again, accumulated some numbers, and some did have good games, but it's a disappointing result overall from a group that should be competing against that Collingwood side.
Yeah, and I think tackling pressure was one of the biggest letdowns, and it mainly weighted towards the midfield, obviously being around the ball the most in any given match. But losing the tackle count like we did when we lost disposal and contested possession to further that point, that's probably the most disappointing aspect. I do disagree to a point about Jason Horne-Francis. It was a bit more of an unnoticeable game. I would agree, and I believe they made mention of that in the commentary, perhaps to halftime. I thought, though, that he remained consistent throughout the 4 quarters, while not barnstorming or groundbreaking, or any other superlative that you want to use as a whole. I think, unfortunately for Jace, he's a number 1 draft pick. He's up on a pedestal, and although he's a fraction under 22 years of age, I think every low light is going to be highlighted, for want of a better phrase, because I actually thought there were many passages of play, like even in the second half when the game was clearly getting out of hand. I think there was still some evidence there that he was trying to will some sort of a spark, even though the score, the margin was getting ridiculous, like way out of hand. And then he contributed, I believe, as the last quarter. I think a good and rare passage of play on the night eventuated in a mark. I think he was about 25 to 30 meters out, straight in front of goal,
Mm.
which was nice because he is going to cop a little bit more attention, and that probably goes towards what you're saying is like he had to earn a bit more unnoticeable possession. Some while he didn't get a lot of contested possession, it is a bit of sometimes a bit of like the quick handball or something like that when we're used to him just kind of holding the ball and exploding and kind of having possession for longer periods of time. Whereas I think it was more those quick
Mm.
flick offs, which as well were part of the problem. Like I think there was a lot of times where players, particularly in the midfield, but all over the ground as well, they got the ball and immediately just handballed it. And there were many occasions where handballing it to someone who's already under pressure, which is a little red flag in regards to something I mentioned in one of the preseason shows was like, we've seen this before. We've tried the high handball game plan before. It may not be recent, but we have. And the undoing of it all is over possession or over handballing, but also just handballing for the sake of handballing when you get possession instead of summing up what your options are, albeit you don't have much time in AFL football. But good AFL footballers need to be able to sum up their options in quick amount of time. And yeah, we just seem to just get the ball and try and release it immediately to our detriment, heavily to our detriment as the score shows. But just to kind of push ahead a little bit, like I do have Jason, my best players. We'll obviously get to that later. One of the more harder games to give plaudits to, obviously, but like I think that he's been admonished for a passage of play where Nick Dacos was alongside him in the middle, and then Dacos pressed forward, ended up in a goal, and Jace was still in the middle. I think we
That was when the
mentioned
game
last year.
That was when the game was pretty. I mean, again, I made the point earlier that I'd like to see it a little bit more fight, but then it depends how much the legs were really. Like we all know what it's like when you get heavy legs. I haven't played sport for a while, but
Yeah.
if it was later in the game, was that later in the game? That's what I'm extending my question way too long. But
Well, I think Nick Dacos started coming into it a bit like more in the second half, but
yeah,
more in the second quarter than the first quarter, definitely.
Mm.
Because I thought Willem Drew started well against Dacos. I believe they shifted Dacos, and that's how he got into the game.
Yeah,
So credit to Drew in that regard.
he was given
But
one of the few bits of fucking fight.
Mongrel,
Give it
yeah,
to the boys.
yeah.
He was giving him the business a little bit around like an anti stoppage or whatever it is. A little bit of not jumper punching, but little pushes. And Dacos certainly wasn't enjoying it.
Just letting him know he's there.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
a shout out to Willem Drew for taking on that role because it's having to go to Nick Dacos is one of the big most thankless jobs in the competition. Unless you absolutely unless you pull like the Kane Corns on Simon Blake job in the grand final in 2004, you're not going to get noticed too much for taking on those thankless roles. But as you said, Dacos got into the game that's kind of been a little bit of a foible of ours is we've tried a few different things on Nick Dacos over the last 2 or 3 ventures, and we kind of have some success at the start, but we just can't keep it going because they'll shift their magnets, and we're trying to still do what we need to do.
Some other teams seem to have success in that regard. We try things, and it just hasn't clearly. When playing Collingwood at the MCG, particularly, it's just blown up in our face whether our focus is too far in that direction rather than the task at hand as a whole. And it's a bit similar to the Dan Houston argument. Why didn't you put more attention into him? And Ken kind of commented in his press conference today. It's just like, well, he's a fucking good player. Ken obviously didn't say fucking. But there's other fish to fry as well. We tried to negate Nick Dacos as well, who's Kane Corn's #1 player out of his top 50 list. So, I just wonder whether our focus is a bit too narrow in that regard sometimes. But a point that I was going to make before is that we kind of backed kind of Rosie up last year in regards to sometimes sagging off of a contest.
Mhm.
And that's the risk that you take sometimes as a midfielder in hopes that your teammates are going to win the ball back and then you're in a great position to go the other way. And I know that that's looked dimly upon if you want to drill down on sagging off, but I think you could make 100 edits out of a weekend of football across the 9 games of midfielders sagging off, taking the risk, hoping that their teammates will win the ball back. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And that's what I mean. Like, yes, there were some examples of a poor work rate,
Mhm.
but across the 4 quarters, like, what is it? He had 6 in the first, 7 in the second, 7 in the third, and then 5 in the last quarter with 5 and a goal. So like I said, it wasn't the lofty, explosive heights that we are pretty familiar with at this point in time, but it was a pretty consistent effort across the 4 quarters, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly not. He's not at all like a worst players or even disappointed with the effort. It's just one of those ones that's in the first half where it felt like the game. Like I was looking for him and he wasn't there
Yeah.
as much as. And I want and while he's still young and we know that he's going to grow so much more and that these games are going to still happen a bit for him. And it certainly wasn't a bad game as you
I'd agree with that.
if you
Yeah.
yeah. It was still just one of those ones that we needed someone to take because Connor Rosé had a good game and did all the things that we need. He kind of needed someone to go with him, and it just like and HORNE-FRANCIS, while his numbers were good, it's just like you wanted him to maybe just add that extra 10% on. And again, he's not alone. Like it's just like it was
Yeah.
everyone was, and again, it's just more a malaise around, and we couldn't get
He
a
needed more of his delicate disposal, particularly inside 50,
mm,
which I think lacked on the night. And you mentioned Connor Rosie. I thought he busted his gut, but him, Wines, they were unfortunately some of the culprits of bombing it into the forward line,
mm,
both under pressure and unforced as well. Um, so I think, yeah, when you mentioned needing a bit more out of Jace, I think, yeah, at times we lacked that more precise entry
yeah,
from
yeah.
our midfield.
I think someone on Twitter, dryly said, "Oh, we've just gone from bombing it to Dixon to bombing it to Rioli or something like that." um,
And on the night, like, yeah, tearing on the night, I can imagine people watching and not making a delicious beef red curry like me were tearing their hair out. Because yeah, like I mentioned, bad habits. Like round one, under pressure, we just folded back into bad habits when
yeah,
we were so hopeful of something different. And again, playing on the MCG, I don't think we utilized the space of the MCG
oh,
enough.
we're
We
so
seem to be
terrible.
playing as if we were on Adelaide Oval. Like
Yeah,
when we were going forward, the wings looked bare. And in my opinion, if we stretched the field out a little bit more, that potentially could have opened more pockets of space for ourselves. Again, I'm not privy to the intricate plans of an AFL football game, but that's just something that I noticed today in the telecast. And whether that was Collingwood as well contributing to that, but I would have thought that if you're making the play, you have the ability to stretch the ground and create space. And I don't think we did that well enough.
yeah, yeah. No, then there's a game planning thing as well. It's like know the
Hmm.
space you've got and to play the ground, and yeah, it's just we do have a poor history at the MCG recently, and it's just that seems like we just I don't know I don't know what it is about that ground that we just don't play it very well, and whereas Collingwood do. Obviously, it's their home ground, but they played it far better than we did. Um, come back to the Dan Houston thing in a moment because you just mentioned about the band. I do have some thoughts on some of the discourse around it. But we'll finish off on the forward line. It's not much to say though because they just got fucking shit entry and there was
Feeding off rations.
yeah exactly it was real real like please sir may I have some more like
Have some more.
um I mean, it was a nice start. Like Lukosius got his first goal within a minute, and it was just like I put on Twitter like he's at around 1,000 goals for the year if he keeps at this rate. Like, but
Yeah.
fortunately, he didn't get enough.
Some good passion out of it too, I might add.
Yes, yeah, good sellies from all the boys getting around him. Um, I haven't. My spotlight is out of the box this week because I don't think Lukosius had a great game. Wasn't in there all that much, but I saw enough out of what he was trying to be excited for the year going forward.
It was a lot of trying, yeah.
His positioning and where he ends up on the like he's pushing up, and again he overran a mark. Like it would have been like it was just like exactly what I want
Yeah.
to see out of him. Push out of 50 and take that mark, and then because if he'd taken that mark and turn around with his disposal, it would have been hopefully a nice entry, which we didn't have much of on the night in the end. But yeah, he didn't have a great game by numbers or indeed by the forward line. Like nothing was great, but I just kind of I got that little bit of a glimpse at to what if we can actually get a game plan working and have decent games, like how good Jack Lukosius can be in our system. So, and then just the quick thought, like turning out, like having a big forward like that, being able to turn around and snap quickly like that was nice for the goal as well. And I think Rosie assisted it as well, which is kind of nice.
He did, yeah.
Which is a cool little touch for their friendship as well. Yeah, not a great game by numbers or by impact or anything from Lukosius because no forward was afforded the ability to have an impact in any great sense. But just little glimpses I got on the night was like enough to me to be like, yeah, I can see why like this guy is going to be a really, really good Port Adelaide player in this year and in future years if we can utilize him correctly because he is. He's got the skill set and the nous for the game for me to be excited for what he's going to bring. Yeah.
I think he just needs a bit more belief, a bit of the Jordan Sweet, and it sounds a bit silly to say, a high draft pick, quite a few years into the system now, but with what happened at Gold Coast, I can imagine that kind of conflicts your mind a little bit. I think just some stability and solidarity will benefit him. Just being settled in a position.
So against the calls of like when our defensive stock started dropping in preseason and everyone went, well, Lukosius has played defense. I was like, no, this is what happened to Gold Coast. We didn't go well. Yeah. Don't just let him settle as a forward. Like
let him be.
Yeah, he's going to be good there.
And let him be. Yeah. Well, and he even pushed up high on occasions anyway and found himself across the halfback line.
Yeah, exactly.
In different intervals. So you get your sugar hit there for people who wanting to swing in back. Yeah. Interesting spotlight. I kind of know what you're getting at. I just think he needs a bit more time in our system and just a bit more belief. I got caught in the two minds on a few occasions where if you just really settled, you're confident in what your role is, what you can provide and what you need to do, like you're just attacking some of those contests and pieces of play a bit better. But I know what you're getting at for sure.
Yeah. As I said, very from outside of the box, but trying to find.
Hey, and I'm loving outside of the box.
Sweet was second on my list. Like I kind of was picking between the two, so I'm glad you went with Sweet first because then it made me feel less bad. Yeah, I just was like, I want to pick someone that, and it was hard to pick a spotlight from the game anyway. But I was just like, there's a lot of things about Lukosius' game I could see. Just it's like if he keeps doing what he's doing and settles into this.
Yeah, if it puts the lotion on the skin. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you mentioned the forwards too. Something I noticed is that we actually took 12 marks inside 50. Like, there's been some poor losses, and we haven't even come close to that. Granted, though, that I think you'll find that a lot of those were outside of 25 to 30 meters. They were like 25 in between 25 and 50, maybe even between 30 and 50, which obviously reduces the percentages for you. But we probably, as X score would suggest, we should have got a better return on the marks inside 50 and our forward 50 entries. I mean,
we only took one set shot from inside the 30 arc. So
there you go. That obviously needs to be higher, but when given the chance inside 50, they're top line elite AFL footballers that we need to be doing better. And I mean, the 4 behinds consecutively at the end of the fourth quarter just kind of epitomized the night. Like, it's worst loss margin wise under Ken. and we had opportunities to
Yeah.
bring that margin down late in the fourth quarter. And I mean, Collingwood certainly put the cue in the rack to an extent, although I thought they still ran out the game with pretty good vigor.
Mhm.
Yeah, we had some decent passages of play when the game is all but lost in the fourth. And then, yeah, we just kicked 4 consecutive behinds,
Mm.
which topped it all off. But yeah, I noticed, I saw 12 marks, and we gave up, what was it, 17 marks inside 50 on their
Mhm.
end, and I think they got much, much better looks at goal. Um, so yeah, I just thought like I said, we've had just as bad losses with far less marks inside 50. AFL footballers need to be taking advantage of that a bit more. I mean, you even had players like Ollie Wines. He took a mark inside 50, and then for whatever reason, Bergman called for it and ran straight into a Collingwood player, basically.
That
So
is
those are some of the round one things that I'm kind of
right? Yeah.
talking about. Yeah, it's just, I can't imagine that type of shit happening third of the way through the season. I definitely hope not.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's just kind of the round one
That's
crap pieces of
some
decision making that I'm
schoolyard
talking
bullshit.
about.
Like just going like, yeah, yeah, give it to me, and not real like not because you're playing in schoolyard and have no idea actually how the game works, and someone's running into like it's just like a lot of things on the night were um indicative of like just lack of lack of game awareness and all those things. Like that Bergman calling for that one was just lacking the understanding that they were set up for that. Um, you know, it wasn't going to happen. And then obviously, we don't have Dan Houston to call it on. So, but we were good at it, with Dan Houston, but it's just like they were set up for everything, and he should have been aware of the
Yeah.
players in vicinity that could impact his ability to get the kick off, and it just didn't happen. There was the other one like Josh Sin just um being a bit too obvious with his attempts to get it over the line, and then
Yeah, that's a real
subsequent
rookie error.
subsequent free kick was like just the defense switched off and didn't account for the fact that they could take a quick free kick and get it into a better goal scoring opportunity. All those things,
And they did.
a lot. Yeah, exactly. A lot of game awareness issues, and that Bergman one you brought up is a big one. Yeah, the forward line overall just it's hard to get a read on it because they just didn't get the opportunities. Obviously, you mentioned there's a few more marks inside 50 than maybe you'd expect based on how you viewed the game, but overall, they just didn't get good looks. Everyone was always the entries weren't good. We reverted to some old habits, as you mentioned earlier. Georgiades had his quietest game since coming back from ACL surgery, which was disappointing. And he just didn't get good looks. Like it's hard to pinpoint anything on him because he does try to work into position, but he was always every time a ball actually came to him, it was always just he was under immense pressure, defenders all over
Yeah.
him.
And Moore had a great game. Whether that
Oh
was
God, the fact we've played
of his own
Darcy Moore's
volition
been
or we made him look good, but he found himself on George, he found himself on Lukosius, and he won his position. And it does pose a good argument for that big focal point out forward because while we want to remove ourselves from a predictable bomb it in at every occasion game plan, every team does still utilize that as a get out
Mhm.
throughout games of football. And in my opinion, I think you do need a focal point, and George and Lukosius just aren't that. They shouldn't
Yeah,
have to be either.
this is the Ollie
Um,
Gould question, doesn't it? We'll get to that
it is.
later.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Or even a Soldo, to be honest,
Yeah, because
question.
considering
Um,
Ollie Wines was pinch hitting in the ruck, like
hmm
that
yeah,
one hit
so
out that wasn't Jordan Sweets.
that's a bit yeah, looking forward. Yeah. Yeah, I know. That going back on that, before watching the replay, again the criticism of Ollie Wines being the backup ruck would have had me believe that he was doing like a quarter of the match. Alternatively, like Sweet, like he did the high majority of the ruck work. And then what was it in the last quarter? Finlayson walked off the ground to come off, and they were like, "No, you have to go back on because Sweet was spent.
Yeah.
He just needed a rest."
Hmm.
So another credit to Jordan Sweet for carrying a heavy load. And But yeah, the focal point will be an interesting argument. I imagine as we do our preview and then throughout the week leading up to selection as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been nice to have a Charlie Dixon of 3-4 years ago in there, wouldn't it? Like, as much as there's Port fans listening right now going, no, we don't want to go.
No.
But, yeah, some of our best footy over the last 5-6 years involved Charlie Dixon being a focal point. So, yeah, it was hard. Willie Rioli toiled but didn't get much result. Joe Berry had his chance to kick his debut goal and unfortunately a bit of a shank of a kick. There wasn't much else to speak of. There just wasn't.
He came into the game, I thought, and then he had, I think it was particularly the second quarter. He got around the ball a lot, and then I felt he kind of drifted back out of the game, unfortunately. But being a small forward, that's your lot in life sometimes, particularly when your team is losing by.
Yeah. If you look across the forward line, it's just everyone. Darcy Byrne-Jones in his 200th, and congrats to Darce again, but didn't have much of the ball. Joe Richards popped up in a few moments, and I liked his positioning and some of his movement and his ball use, but it just didn't get enough opportunity. And as far as Willie Rioli goes, we all know what he's capable of. Same with Sam Powell-Pepper, they just didn't get the opportunity in this game. So I don't know if there's anything else to really talk about with the forward line. Like, it's just like it's all predicated on what we do in the middle of the field, and we just didn't. Nothing on the night went right, so it's hard to get a read in the forward line. I still have high hopes. Again, high hopes that we talked about in preseason. We're not sure where they sit in the Tom Pay at the end of the year, but we do think we have a reasonable mix of players. It's just this game was a real education in what happens when you have a group of players just not in synergy with it, like in sync with each other at all. Whereas, Collingwood, I mean, I know they've got some generational stars in the likes of Nick Dacos and whatnot, but overall, I look at Collingwood and go, if you look at the teams on paper, you go, this shouldn't be a 91-point loss. So a 91-point loss comes from one team not knowing what the fuck they're doing versus one team being very connected and maybe you say, and then Dan Houston played as he didn't play in their first week and had a great game. Unfortunately, maybe it's the time to bring it up. I am in.
Go for it.
I am. Me and rivalries and whatnot, and I'm fully okay with if Dan Houston catches up with any of these Port players in off seasons or during the season for a beer and outside of football hours and whatnot. But I am very much in agreement with Kane Corns about the post. I don't want to fucking see that. When I saw that shit at the end of the game, I'm like, not here for it. I subscribe. The way Alan Border turned around the Australian cricket team in the late 80s on the Ashes tour was saying, don't be mates with these cunts.
Yeah.
You can't, that kind of spoke to, I know I'm being a little bit facetious there, but it was like Alan Border, like the way that Australian cricket team turned around was like, you've got to have some hard ass about you. And I think there's been enough talk, and actually Jake Collins on 5AA last night, we're recording on Tuesday night here, obviously. He said, we've talked about it in meetings afterwards, and maybe we were a little bit too nice. Whether they that wasn't in particularly talking about the post-match wait around for to finish his interviews and all do a walk past handshake line. But, I'd much rather, like, we just witnessed the Merseyside derby recently at Everton that didn't go great for Liverpool, but when an Everton player, after the game had finished, did a shush sign to the Liverpool fans, a Liverpool player that's from Liverpool as well, ran over and pretty much got into a fight with the guy. Like, and I'm not saying I want that, but I want that kind of energy. Like, that's too nice. And Tim Ginniver said on 5AA as well, he's like, no, if Rowan Smith had been on the other side, I wouldn't have talked to him for days. Like, and we're mates, but I wouldn't have talked to him for fucking days. Like, and that's what there's a little bit of that. That's, again, I'm not.
There's a bit of symbolism in it all.
Exactly. That's
therefore tribalism
far too
as well.
nice for me. Like, you need to. I know that in life and we're humans and people are friends and all that stuff, but as far as football as a sport and as a vocation goes, there is a certain part of it that actually there is a mindset thing to it that you have to. It's not, and we always there's often invocations of war and it's a battle on the field and what's across the white line and all those things. And those actually seriously saying those things is wrong because it isn't. It is just a game still. But as far as are you mentally set up for a game, like teams have shown, like the premiership teams are always very connected as a unit, connected as a group, and do have a little bit of a hard ass edge to them. And whether you look back at the Choco era, like Choco wouldn't have stood for that. He wouldn't have let that go. And I'm not criticizing Ken by invoking that either. I know Ken's had it, like Ken was the one instigator at the end of the Hawthorn game last year. And that's why I loved that a little bit, even if it was unbecoming of a coach.
Shithousery.
Yeah. But yeah, that's far too nice from the playing group for me to a player that like burned. And what we've seen, I don't know if you've seen the articles about the Dan Houston's trade saga articles that have come out over the last week. Like he was, he went, it was mid-year last year that he told the team he was going to go, and which I hate that shit. And he basically, even though, and I it's an AFL thing, like you shouldn't get held over the barrel that much by a team player that's got 3 years left on a contract. But yeah, like this guy signed a 5-year contract 2 years into it, even though he became an All-Australian in those 2 years, was part of a team that was playing finals, decided, no, I'm going to go home and say fuck the lot of you. I know I'm being a little bit crass in my language, but that's kind of what I'm trying to invoke, is that the team needs to take that kind of attitude.
Just treat, even if it wasn't that, treat it like that.
Yes,
when you're like coming up against that person.
Yeah. It's Collingwood. He went to Collingwood. He left you in the lurch, didn't go through. Like he should have been a pillar of the next premiership team because he's got a few years of high quality footy left in him. And we were the team that took him from the rookie draft, and there's all those storylines to it. Like, no, fuck that guy. Like, yeah, and absolutely have a beer with him in off season, and he could be your best mate, and he's in your wedding. I don't care. I don't want to see you waiting around on the field to all do a handshake line with him 5 minutes after the game's finished. That's just, for me, that's not on. I don't know how strong you are on it, but those are the kind of things that, we don't want to go to the Dave Granger days of footy, even though
no one's asking for that. Yeah,
but you need to have a little bit of hard ass edge about you as a squad and what you do visibly on the field. And as Dan Houston's walked off,
because it is an optics industry, as much as a performance and
those optics,
whatever else,
perform as subconscious. Like I believe in the subconscious mindset. Like if you're thinking that's okay, then you're lacking that little bit of hardness that I think some of our teams had in the. Like Chad Corns, on grand final day in 2004, just walking past and giving Jonathan Brown's knee a whack. Like this Port Adelaide team, I don't know if they've got that in them like at the moment, but based on what I've seen. And that's not anything I don't know. And Chad Corns is a coach there, so and he's
that's exactly right. Yeah, and Tim Ginniver said after that interview with Chad, and he said, they've got two coaches, such as the person we just interviewed in Chad Corns and Josh Carr as the incumbent coach.
Yeah, who epitomizes that hard.
Do they think anyone? Are they two people who you would have described as nice in their playing days? And it is. You don't want people sniping anyone. That's definitely not what you're calling for. But you just want a bit of body language suggesting that once you cross that white line, the ball is your object. And you're there, you mean business. One thing I would say is, though, listening to Kane Corns made me think that they legitimately did just like wait around. I think they were still shaking hands with other players, but it's not like they rushed to get that done. Like shaking hands with all the other players and getting the fuck off the field. That it was kind of standing around and doing the post-match kind of pleasantries, if you will. But I completely understand what you mean, and I love the passion in which you put that point across. Because he's opposition now. He's not your mate. The game, the game's done. But fuck it. Turn around. Walk off the field. I mean, even then, like Connor Rosie, when he didn't look impressed at all. You don't need to do it, though. Just fucking walk off.
Yeah, I'd love like
That'd be funny to see.
yeah, like I mean, not that anyone's done anything nefarious with others' wives, but I always remember like Wayne Bridge like refusing to shake John Terry's hand after like Wayne Bridge left Chelsea and John Terry had done some dirty things with Wayne Bridge's missus and like then they did and Premier League soccer has the official handshake line and it was a big I remember watching the game because they were like what's going to happen here and Wayne Bridge just completely avoided him which made it even like people were like, "Oh, well, he just
Yeah.
shake his hand," and that's like, and not that that's happened, but it's just like you need to take that kind of attitude. Like, no, this guy left. Like, no, like I would have loved if Connor Rosie had just like walked straight past Dan Houston. That would have been like, and not that I'm criticizing his captaincy. He's just you just brought up his name. That kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and because he
I
didn't
just
look
like to
happy
see
to
something like that. Yeah,
shake
just
his hand either.
yeah, just be like, just walk past him. I would have loved that to be the talking point from this week. Like AFL, like Jared Waitley just being like, "What does this mean?" Like Connor Rosie just pointed the hands. I'm like, that's cap. But I would like to see that again. I think Connor Rosie's a great captain and gets to far too much shit. But yeah, I just didn't. I just don't like. It's a little bit of that new age pleasantry stuff about. And I'm like, obviously, I'm a lefty wing.
Yeah.
Some would refer to me as like as far as like my worldview, but as far as the
And
sport,
an apologist.
yeah,
Yeah.
the sports goes, like, and in these little situations, I'm like, no, just be an asshole at sports. Like, we're allowed to do that. That's what we're allowed to do on a sporting field. Is like you're allowed to do things you can't do anywhere else. Like, just be
Yeah.
a to someone. And I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that in the game too. I think, yeah, that's what a little bit of my worry got it going early. Is just like there wasn't a whole lot of attention on him, and there wasn't the sparks. Like, I know maybe we didn't see like the first Jason Horne-Francis game against North Melbourne was a bit of it. Like there's none of that either, but it wasn't. Yeah, it's not that I don't want to see targeting or anything like that, but just a little bit of just let him know
You
that
can still touch a player up within the boundaries of the game.
particularly when we've had the Jed McEntee on the game against Geelong and stuff like
On
that.
Stewart, yeah, yeah,
We've got
exactly. Like
history of being a pesky side. Like why can't
that's all fair and reasonable. Yeah.
yeah and
So
there's ways to do it within the realms of the within
use it on the field.
yes yeah there's ways to do it within the rules of the game that are perfectly acceptable and we've got history of doing it, so it's disappointing that we didn't do that. And then yeah,
Yeah. And when
um,
players are interviewed about, the trade period and they go, "Oh yeah, well, that's just the way it is these days. That's the industry we're in
mm,
now." And that may be the case. Doesn't mean you have to like it.
yeah,
Because I certainly don't, and you certainly don't. Like we've mentioned, I think it was last week. So yeah, fuck it. Like you had a shit game, just fuck off.
yeah.
Who cares?
Don't talk to him for a few days, as Tim Jennifer said. Like he wouldn't do. Yeah, and
Hmm.
maybe you get a little text from Dan Houston later in the week going like, oh, good seeing you boys, and you go yeah, and you give a little thumbs up reaction to it. Don't even reply with a text. Like just let it simmer for a little
Well,
while.
they probably a group of them probably caught up with him for coffee
Exactly.
on Sunday or whatever. Like,
That's
yeah,
fine, but yeah, it's just. I mean,
that happened. We all know that happens, and that would have like happened. But
Willie Rioli posted on his Instagram
optics.
stories that he was at Miller's game on because it was his 100th game on Sunday, and he was there supporting Wayne Miller, which is a Crows player.
Who was that? Sorry.
Willie Rioli, he posted on Instagram that he was supporting.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and he's a mate off the field, and but he didn't. That's the optics of it. Is like that was his personal. He's allowed to do that on his personal Instagram. It's just like the wearing the port jumper after you've just been spanked by 91 points and just doing the little pleasantries in a kind of like a way that you're all focusing around Dan Houston in that moment just felt just off for me. And yeah, and that's like I want to see a bit more of a hard edge with this side, and maybe that's what who knows what the future brings. But yeah, I'm hoping if it's not like and I know Ken can bring it. It's just like yeah, it's whether this weird
Yeah.
situation we're in, who knows? But and that might have just been a player led decision as well. We don't know. Um, and then if that's the case, then I want someone there to have
I
that.
want them to reevaluate.
Yeah, have that little Alan Border moment where because I think Alan Border didn't want to be. He's just like, no, the way we need to be to galvanise as a side and win this Ashes series, we need to stop catching up for a beer with the Englishmen all the time and go and fucking win this thing. Like go cold on them is what he did, and they won 4-0, I think. So yeah, Any other thoughts, or do you want to get onto the awards? And just a great week to do awards.
Yeah, fantastic to get out of blocks with in regards to awards. But yeah, no, I think we covered everything pretty well then. Let's get into it.
Alrighty, so as those on socials would have noticed, over the weekend we put up that we've talked about it over the last few weeks, but renaming the Sweeney Award, which of course the Sweeney Award and what the award is now is to kind of recognise those moments in the field outside of goals, because we do our goal of the week, which we'll do shortly as well. Whether it be great moments of wizardry or just defensive solidarity, or just those 1%er moments, whatever it may be, just a moment on the field that gives you the that love of footy moments that just lift your heart, whether it be those moments of greatness or just in those little intangibles. The that's what I love about the award, is it rewards a wide spectrum. Of course, as we announced last week, that Miles Bergman's double tackle in the Carlton game last year won our Sweeney last year, and what is now to be renamed as the what was voted out of the three options, which are obviously the Wilson Gray Award, which is named after Michael Wilson and Robbie Gray, players at both ends of the field that provided us with those moments of defensive, incredible defensive efforts, as well as some wizardry with the ball as well, with Robbie Gray. The other option being the Chad, which is after Chad Corns, the ultimate swingman that could do everything at both ends of the field and in the guts as well, as we saw at moments in his career. And the third option being the essence of footy, which is kind of what the award is all about, and the essence of footy is very much a part of the award. But the overwhelming winner of the award, of the renaming of the Sweeney, was the Wilson Gray Award. So that will be what it is known going forward, and I'm very happy with that. I assume you're pretty similar. You're pretty similar with that as well, Jamie.
Yes, definitely. It was certainly one of our. It was certainly, I think, our favorite behind the curtain, but obviously wanted to put it to everyone, to obviously involve everyone, give everyone a voice and an opportunity to vote. Wilbur Wilson, a family favorite in my household, and much the same as Robbie Gray, and Wilson Gray has a nice ring to it, I think, and I'm glad that the majority of people agreed. I know that Andrea had a bit of a difficult time herself, nailing one down. But yeah, and look, some good options for sure. We wanted to provide good options, but I'm happy with what it is, and it does. And both of those players combined kind of represent what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Ash watching on YouTube, who commented last week when we brought up the options and said Wilson Gray just sounded legit, and that's kind of. Yeah, it just sounds like a nice award name, and obviously with the names behind it, really carries some gravitas, I think. But the Sweeney will live long in the memory. As I know,
sure.
Shout out Monty on Instagram commented with a GIF of Sydney Sweeney just being like, "Don't do it." Like, I was just like, "Look, it's a compelling argument, my friend." But we just want to.
Yeah. Sydney Sweeney will live long in the mind for sure. Just in another regard, not a football awards regard.
Although, her image pops up plenty of times on the YouTube podcast for last year, which will live in perpetuity as well as this award will now. But yeah, it just felt right. And you and I standing on the outer at Alberton last year, when you brought it up to me, it was just like, it makes sense to find an award name that lives in perpetuity a little bit more. And certainly with the kind of history and ethos of our club, that is our club's history, is like things that stand the test of time. So, and memes ultimately, while they do often, have longevity, it's just like for the award and the gravitas we want to give it. Like, while it started as a bit of like a inspired by a meme thing, it became something like we really put time into, and having a name that is more representative of the club love and ethos of the club and the history of the club seems right. So I'm glad we landed on Wilson Gray. And for the first, it's a shit of a game to be starting the award off with, but
definitely
Michael Wilson and Robbie Gray played in plenty of shit games as well. So, and they still had some good efforts in those games. So, hey, we lost a game in our 2004 Premiership year by 96 points. So it happens in the best of years. But yes, the first Wilson Gray nomination for this year, 2025, goes to you, Jamie. What did you find from this this lovely game of ours?
Yeah, look, real scraping off of the bottom of the barrel. Again, much like the Brisbane game last year, where we had similar comments, but every game has something. But I did want to bring this one up. This was probably going to be my vote anyway, but just to go right back to the defensive line. So my Wilson Gray nomination for round one is Josh Sin's Torp.
It's good in theory. The tap back to the middle. Hill not far away, but Sin just blasting it out of there. And what a kick it turned out to be. Suddenly it's...
early in the second quarter, it was just a huge bomb. We all love to see a Torp. It cleared a lot of space. I think we got a 4A forward. I'm not sure if we scored off of it, though. My apologies. But I did want to just comment.
The game.
Look, law of averages based on this game. Yeah, probably not. We probably got it to inside 40 and 50 meters, and then it got turned over. But anyway, I digress. Did want to mention Josh Sin. Someone mentioned on social media. I don't know who it is. If they're listening, I'm sorry that I can't remember who it actually was that posted it, but they mentioned that although Hill got off the chain a little bit, got a bit junk time reward late in the fourth quarter, I thought Josh Sin, who was matched up against him for most of the game, applied himself really well and held him to account for most of the game. Sin, obviously, still warming to our side and his place in the side, but I just wanted to give him some credit because I forgot to mention it when we were talking about the defensive line. Josh Sin's Torp early in the second quarter is my first Wilson Gray nomination.
I love that. I love that a Torp is the first one because that is one of those essence of footy things. I mean, the Marmalade boys started their career with the Torp, essentially.
The Torp, yeah. I'm pretty sure Dan Houston got nominated for a Torp last year as well.
Was it? Was it? What did you
Han Dustin?
Han Dustin, yeah.
Han Dustin.
I love that. And yet, no, you're right. The commentators even made note of it on the night, somewhere in the third quarter. Like, despite the fact that Collingwood are fucking kicking the shit out of this, is not verbatim, by the way, kicking the shit out of Port Adelaide. Bobby Hill has been quite quiet. So he did. Yeah, he really only got off the chain late in the game when it was a done deal anyway. So
yeah.
And we're talking about a guy that's a Norm Smith medalist in a close run grand final. So Bobby Hill does have good history of being very, very effective in big games, and full credit to him. He's a great player. Begrudgingly say that. So a great job to keep him quiet for what was a pretty good day for most Collingwood players out there otherwise. So my Wilson Gray, as you said, also comes from defensive end despite the game, but I guess a lot of the ball was spent down there. It's scraping the barrel a little bit, but there was a moment 5 minutes into the game where the ball was coming inboard to Lockie Schultz, and looked like it should be good because Logan Evans was the closest defender, and he started running one way towards goal when the ball actually gets cut back into Lockie Schultz, so Logan Evans turns around again. And he doesn't exactly spoil, but he does enough to put Lockie Schultz off the ball that actually comes to ground and comes to a contest, and we end up getting it out for a short moment. I think it comes back in pretty quickly again for a goal. But
hustled it forward. Elliott not really trying to take the mark. Membry slick onto the boot, a perfect waiting for Schultz. Good combat from Logan Evans.
Logan Evans, that's one of those 1% moments that we were probably missing a little bit more on the day. And again, that may come down to game plan, and rather than it's just positioning was a struggle on the day, but it was one of those ones that 99% of the time when a defender has to double back and they're already behind the 8 ball a little bit, the ball is going to get marked by the forward, and Logan Evans just did enough, got his body in the position he didn't even spoil it, he just went for the spoil, and it put Lockie Schultz off enough to that he spilled what it looked like it was going to be a mark to Lockie Schultz 40 out dead in front, and Logan Evans did enough to make sure that ball came to ground. It's a 1%er. It's a low. It's one of those ones that. I think even one of the commentators just made a little note just to said, "Oh, good effort from Logan Evans there." And not that Logan had a great game, but it's again one of those little moments that fills me with great hope for Logan Evans' future, because we've talked a lot about his game intelligence and just how he reads the game, and even in a moment where he had to double back a little bit, kind of like a goalkeeper in soccer that starts one way and has to move their body back when they realise that the shot's going the other way. He somehow made a way to affect the spoil, affect what was kind of like a spoil without being a full spoil. So a little defensive effort that I appreciated in a game that I couldn't find. I texted you at one point while I was watching the game, forgetting that you were out at a cooking class, and I said, "Isn't this a great week to rename the award when I can't fucking find a knob?"
Yeah.
I was deep in my cups, as me and my buddy Shay, shout out Shay, who doesn't listen at all, because he doesn't understand the sport because he's an American, and refuses to. He once was like, "What do you guys score, like skibbity doos?" I was like, "No, they're goals. They're just goals." Like,
yeah, it's a field sport with a ball. Yeah, it's a goal.
They're worth 6 points. And I remember his buddy even going like, "I have no idea what that means," and like he was being facetious because it was like a touchdown's worth 6 points. So, yeah, my buddy Shay, who, he's. Has no idea what the sport is. But anyway, Logan Evans loved that moment for him. And it's one of those moments that, in a game that he didn't have a great game like many, that still gives me hope for, like, I'm pretty confident in Logan Evans being a long-term Port player as he runs around in the former Dixon number. Good to see a player I love running around in that number as well.
As do I.
Goal of the week. Again, there's 6 to choose from, so it's a difficult one. And I'm getting to go first, which I'm fucking glad about because I'm picking probably. I assume I'm going to pick what. I'll let you talk about what you had afterwards, but I'm assuming mine might be what you had as your top pick on Travis Boak.
Got the handball out. Boak pounces and delivers. He's a legend and is so well loved. And this man, Travis Boak, has just epitomised everything that Russell Ebert was about as well.
Yeah, he clears his. Jamie's not giving anything away with his little chin stroke there. I'm not sure, but Travis Boak getting off. After last year when he kicked 0 goals 15 or whatever it was before he finally kicked one, he gets off with one straight away this year to make sure that isn't a storyline again. And a pretty nice one, collecting one like from 40 and kind of, it's half a straight kick, half a snap. Like he just has to hook it off the boot really nicely. And just a great finish from, obviously, he's in your background right now. For those that are watching on YouTube, or those that are listening, he is in Jamie's background alongside.
He is, we promise.
Yeah. Alongside Russell Ebert, as we obviously celebrate that he equaled Russell Ebert's club games record this last weekend and goes ahead this weekend as we'll get to our preview shortly. Travis Boak's goal, one of 6 to choose from. But I thought it was a really, really nice finish.
Yeah. Love that Boakie's started the year off with in the goals, as you mentioned, as opposed to last season. But it wasn't actually my pick. I kept it fairly simple. Like you said, only a handful to pick from, but I've gone Willie's goal in the first quarter where he's tricked, maybe not the right word, but tricked, I'll use, the defender into running too far just to stop and brace, run back on the ball and grubber it, so to speak, into the big sticks. So Willie's mine. Willie Rioli.
Burn-Jones has got some toe. Just a little instep ball was unusual to no one. Works out the end of Rioli, creates a bit of space. Willie!
T. McInnes thinks he's going to go across, and he just waits and allows the ball to come to him. Just backpedals very quickly and makes it look so easy.
He's a special player. It's spatial awareness, but it's also assessing your exit plan. If he turns onto his natural right foot, he turns back into pressure, opens up his body, easy goal.
Yeah, I watched it, and it's completely slipped my mind. That was a good goal as well. That's a great pick as well. Willie, who featured many, many times last year, and probably if not for the Darcy Burn-Jones goal last year that won our goal of the year last year, Willie might have been up for a pretty good shout for any of the number of his from last year. So yeah, I'm sure he'll be up for a fair few nominations this year, provided he stays fit, because he is magic, as we saw, as we have seen since he's been here, basically. So yeah, no, two good.
Yeah, yeah,
Considering only had 6 for the day, it's a couple of good ones.
yeah. There's always a couple of good ones. So
Yeah.
yeah, look forward to seeing what people vote for.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to getting the packages together. Alrighty. Player of the year. The votes begin. Zach Butters won it last year, and he's not going to feature for the first at least 5-6 weeks. So it's going to be an interesting kickstart.
Begin.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get to kick us off with your votes before I get into them. So let's hear it, Jamie.
I do.
I know that one player that features already, but yeah.
Yes, I would hope that everyone's who's been listening has been paying attention. Because, yes, I did give one away. Yeah. First of all, quick honourable mention to Farrell. I mentioned him in our defensive line breakdown, but yeah, unlucky to miss out on the votes. But my one vote, as I mentioned, JHF found himself in the best players for me. A couple of key highlights. He got the 25 disposals, 330 metres gain. He did kick a goal and had 7 clearances, 4 from the centre. 2 votes goes to Jordan Sweet, another person who I brought up. Like I said, I think he's probably one of very few players, if not the only player, who could put up an argument that he won his position on the night. 36 hit outs, 14 disposals as well with 230 metres gain. A few marks. He also kicked a goal and a few inside and rebound 50s. My 3 votes goes to Ollie Wines. 34 disposals, 18 of which were contested. 5 intercepts as well for Ollie. Touch under 300 metres gain. 5 score involvements. A huge 10 clearances as well. Bit of a quintessential Ollie game. Obviously would like the disposal efficiency to be a bit higher, but as we know, he's not a real high efficiency guy. That's not his go. It's not his role. But again, like I mentioned in the midfield kind of breakdown, unfortunately just found himself bombing the ball a bit too much for my liking, but he still put in some hard yards in my opinion and was 3rd best on ground. 4 votes goes to Travis Boak for an old buck. He still keeps on keeping on Boakey. 28 disposals, 12 of which were contested. 6 intercepts as well. Again, a touch under 300 metres gained. He had 8 marks. Kicked the 1 goal, 1 which you alluded to. You nominated his goal, and 6 tackles as well. So getting involved, I still envisage him maybe rotating through that sub position throughout the year. And hopefully that means that we're actually fixing our woes from Saturday night and getting our season on track. But that leaves my best on ground, and that's the captain in Connor Rosie. Under a lot of pressure. Again, not having his right-hand man in Zach Butters, which is well documented. But I think off of the back of his preseason, this kind of game was foreshadowed, and he applied himself as he probably should have, in my opinion. 35 disposals, going at 71%, which, as a whole, I'd like everyone's disposal to be a bit higher. I think we ended up 70% as a team disposal efficiency. So he was running at 71%, again, with 35 disposals, 680 metres gained, which is just silly. He had a goal assist to go in with 6 score involvements, 5 clearances, 9 inside 50s, and 4 tackles to round out some of his statistical highlights.
Mm. Yeah, we've gone pretty similar on our votes.
Yeah, it's one of those type of games.
Yeah, a couple of changes though. So for mine, and I like JHF being in yours. He didn't get into mine, obviously. I mean, that probably was predicated by how I talked about him, and I just didn't notice him enough for me. But I'm like, he was one of our best, 6 or 7 for me. Like he would have, if there wasn't these ones I had, he would have been in there. He was close. He just, it's one of those games I would have liked to see that little bit more that gets him into mine. But I guess he goes as my honourable mention. My 1 vote goes to Wines, and I think he had a great Ollie Wines game. I mean, he monstered the clearances, and as he mentioned, and had the numbers. And considering you mentioned his disposal efficiency has never been one of his strengths, but he went at 64% or something like that, and not too far off of the 68 to 70s that a lot of the other guys were running at. So he went okay, and it's one thing we've touched on over the last year or so, that he's gotten better in that respect, despite it not being a strong suit of his game.
Yes.
Yeah. My 2 votes goes to Jordan Sweet, so same as you, and same all the numbers that you mentioned. And as we talked about him earlier, he continues at this pace this year as a ruckman. He's going to be he might be getting a few votes week in, week out, because he's just the way he plays the game and the passion he obviously exudes for Port Adelaide gets a few brownie points, I think, in most sport fans' eyes. So yeah. My 3 votes I actually gave to Kane Farrell, who was your honourable mention. I just thought, considering the storyline,
glad about that.
Yes, considering the storyline around him, not that there's a huge amount of pressure on him, but it is just everyone's gone. With Dan Houston gone, it's what are you going to do? Kane Farrell, 78% disposal efficiency for 400 metres gained, 7 intercepts, kind of did everything you want him to do. He had 23 disposals total as well. Did everything you want him to do in his role. It's just everything around him didn't go super well. If you'd replaced Kane Farrell with Dan Houston and the exact same game had unfolded around, it would have been pretty similar. So, a good first sign for what he's hopefully can bring to us this year. Even if he's not going to be, no one's going to be Dan Houston, but I think Kane Farrell is going to have a fairly good role to play. Yahtzee for the last 2. Boke at 4, Rosie at 5.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned the numbers, so I don't need to go over them again. So, Rosie, the one number you didn't mention, which I'm shocked at, 29. 29 pressure acts.
I did it mostly off my phone, and then I rushed the extra stats before recording. Yeah, of course. How could I forget?
20.
Run it for me again, Dave. What were the numbers?
29 pressure acts for Connor Rosie, including 15 of those being a defensive half pressure acts. He led the team, obviously, in both facets of that statistical category. Darcy Burn-Jones was second with pressure acts.
I know why.
So Connor Rosie cleared. Once again, one of our favourite niche stats that we like, that just constantly... I even saw there's a Crows fan on Twitter that just mentioned Connor Rosie's an uninspiring captain. There's some... Port fans replying saying, "Yeah, I agree." I'm just like, God, these people just don't watch the game.
God damn it!
because he's a slenderer player and he plays with a panache.
He's got some thick legs.
But it's just there is such a base level analysis of Connor Rosie based on purely how he looks.
Yeah,
and they build an entire idea of what he is, and it's just not that. Yeah, and yes, we lost by 91 points, so it's a very easy to be like, we lost by 91 points. Connor Rosie's flashy, not an inspiring captain. That's not at all what happened there. It's nothing to do with Connor Rosie. It's everything to do with a lot of things going wrong. But what he does as a player, as far as his numbers are often pretty close to the top of the team as far as whether it be tackling. Tackling, he had 4 tackles for the day. I think the person that led the team was Boke with 6. There wasn't. The team as an entirety couldn't get close to tackling. As we said, we lost the tackle count. So, as far as Connor Rosie's numbers go in that realm, I think Champion Data had him as one of the top 15 rated players for the entire round out of the entire league. So,
I saw that. Yeah.
So his numbers, what he does, and yes, you can whatever the leadership things that happen in between games and in the rooms and whatever. We don't know those things, but
we're not privy to them. It's all it's what a lot of people need to take into account.
Yeah, but what we can say is what he's doing on field is exactly what we need him to do, and he did enough of that on the weekend. It was an entire. It was a very good example for any footy fans out there as to what synergy or the lack of it can do for a team that has a fair few good parts, but couldn't put it together in a day. So, Rosie best on field for both of us. That's first round of the Player of the Year votes this year, which, as I said, our last year's winner won't feature for at least the first 5 to 6 weeks. So it'll make for an interesting count early on. I'm going to keep. As I did towards the end of last year, once I got the Patreon going, I'll keep the leaderboard going on there. So for those that want to keep track, but obviously if you listen to each week, you can keep track anyway. So,
if
Patreon.
you're paying attention, you'll pick it up.
Yeah. exactly. Last year's count got closer than I expected, as we talked about last week. So, yeah, no, looking forward to. I'm looking forward to the awards again this year, and obviously, hopefully, we get some much more inspiring, and great Wilson Gray moments going forward. Obviously, with some wins, but decent start anyway. Alrighty, if there's nothing else from you on that game, and I'm more than happy to move past it. I'm happy to get into talking about
It's
our.
in the rear view now.
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing you can do. Control what you can control, which isn't the past ever. But what you can do is control your future, which our future contains Richmond, who, 3:45 p.m. on this Saturday Arvo at Adelaide Oval, Garner Land. Richmond, off the back of a win so large, we had round one debutants swinging their meat and potatoes out in celebration. So, it's just an incredible night of football. We were recording our round one squads for the Patreon members out there, and shout out to all the Patreon members for the Creed out there. I hope you enjoyed that one. We'll continue to do that. Just missed, like, because we jumped on to record when Richmond was like 5-6 goals down. We're like, yeah, no, this is a boring game. Like, we'll jump on a record. We were going to do it anyway, but and then like I took my headphones off after we got off our call and just heard the commentators going like, one of the most incredible wins in recent memory. And I was like, wait, what the fuck happened? Raced into the TV.
How much did Carlton actually win by?
Yeah. And then I see like they're interviewing like a Richmond player at the end, and I just texted you. I was like, Richmond won. It's like, this is incredible. So, caused one of the all-time Dan Gorringe meltdowns. Changing the
great
name.
Value.
Yeah, it was great. Changing the name of like one of the fastest growing podcasts in Australian sports. But they're coming to town with one of their more experienced heads in Tom Lynch, going because he did Tom Lynch things on the field again. He's a culprit. Yep, he copped a 1 week whack from the tribunal earlier this evening. So for a team that's lacking in senior heads and got through on the back of just an inspiring run and a classic Carlton meltdown, because Carlton actually did the work they needed. They got up by 7 goals in the second quarter or third quarter. They did the work they needed to do and then just let it slip. Though the storyline is, before we get into the lines, the storyline is, well, Port are coming off the back of a disastrous loss. Richmond are coming in off the back of an inspiring win. And I do have my anxieties, as I do as a sports fan. That's what we do. Sure. We exist in the area of anxiety most of our time in life as a sports fan. Objectively, I go, any hope they had to win this game is lessened significantly by the loss of a figurehead like Tom Lynch in that forward line. He's such an important part of a team that's lost so much of their greatness from the premiership area. I can't help but think that Tom Lynch going out just saps a lot of that energy, and they're coming in with a lot of like that hype. Like this is, instead of being like we got to cop Collingwood last week off the back of a kick in the arse game. Mm-hmm. We're copying Richmond off the back of an unlikely win, and there's a lot of energy and stuff around them. I actually prefer where we're going into this game than I would prefer going in off a competitive win over a competitive game over Collingwood, and regardless of where Richmond are at. But considering the situations, I'm actually feeling reasonably comfortable about it, which is surprising because usually I can talk myself into losing to anyone if I really think about it and get into the weeds of it. So yeah, I'm feeling okay about it despite everything that's occurred over the last weekend.
Yeah, obviously, we can all talk ourselves into a loss for sure, doomsday and whatnot. But nothing is as bad as it seems, equally as much as nothing is ever as good as it seems. But for a young up-and-coming side with one less senior figure, like you said, his output probably diminishing returns these days, both through suspension and injury for Tom Lynch. But I'm big on senior leadership on field, so it doesn't help things for them. And you just hope, and I mean, AFL seasons would suggest that a young up-and-coming side who do get a fluke win in round one probably have a letdown the next week, and I'm obviously hoping that that's the case. And like I said, leading into our analysis of the Collingwood match, I pretty sure every player on the field can improve from a Port Adelaide sense. That is, every player on the field has played better than what they did, and they're all capable of a better performance. How our selection shapes up will be interesting, but it's our first game at home. Travis Stokes breaking the games record in the criteria that it's listed as competitive matches, and not necessarily just regular season AFL games. That must be noted. Not that Russell even played any AFL games, but yeah. So it's a big occasion.
Yeah, season
home fans.
So
that was the VFL though, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah, I was being silly and technical, and yeah, a bit stupid in that comment, but yeah. So yeah, it's a big occasion. I haven't checked the forecast. I imagine it's going to be fairly okay weather. Our first opportunity to go to Adelaide Oval, 29. Did you mention? Yeah. So a nice warm day. Look, like I mentioned about Collingwood, they were the ones getting the same treatment we're getting right now. I desperately hope our response is in a similar vein to Collingwood's against us on Saturday, against an up and coming side who do, to be fair, have some talent throughout there. So they've still got some premiership heroes in their defence like Floston. Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto can find the football. So in no way should we be taking them lightly. Now, Ken always says that no game is ever easy in AFL, which suggests to me that they're going to be coached in the right way this week. And by coached in the right way, I think they're going to be showing a mirror to themselves figuratively, and they need to take a good hard look at themselves and how they want to actually play the game of football this weekend. And furthermore, and most of that comes down to execution, like I was hammering home, and like you mentioned as well.
Yeah. The mirror to themselves is a very good point, because I think they've mentioned both Ken and Chad in their interviews this week is that the reviews were pretty open and honest, and a lot of players were pretty disappointed in their own efforts when they looked back on them in reflection, which again, mirror. So and I think I mean, again, no game is easy, but you want to. I think it's an interesting test to come up against a team buoyed by pure vibes and just unexpected joy that they got from an unexpected win last week. But it's just
and we were that team in 2013, so like it's not uncommon for a young team to gain momentum and run with it for a period of time under a new coach. Although, that was Ken's first season. This is Adam Uze's second season. So, we cannot take them lightly whatsoever.
Yeah, and we shouldn't take any team lightly ever in the AFL.
No, I agree.
It's been one of those things that's frustrated at times when we get into those games where we are in a bit more of a turgid battle than we should be to start with against a team that you just should be, spanking off the park, and you see other teams do it. But AFL is never a linear thing. It's just always funny when you. It's always like those last few years, and the Crows might be a legitimately good team this year, but the Crows would spank the teams that we wouldn't spank, but then they'd lose to teams that we were beating as well. So it's just like it was just a weird thing that they had the perfect game plan to take advantage.
Yeah.
The bad.
It's AFL in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. It's and this sums up why it's such a struggle, such a beautiful sport. In the fact that like many sports, they're not played on paper, and that's why it makes it so you can do all these you can do all the podcasting we do, and it's still never eventuate to what you expect. Such as last week being in the negative, or for opposite example, Sydney last year, we never would have expected to beat by 112 points. So you never know what's going to happen.
Correct.
Start with. I'm just looking at their defensive line, so I'm just thinking we'll start with the forward line. It's a big game for our forwards because they, not to say it was completely their fault, obviously, and it's not their fault because your forward line can only function as well as what's happening to get them the ball. But as you said, Boston being one of the key figureheads back there, but otherwise it's a reasonably
Yeah, Broad is still around as well for some of that senior leadership.
But I still look at it. I did it last week too. I still look at it as I just maybe I'm blighted by just as I look at blight in their backline as well. I still just have some sneaky hopes for us getting it together with this forward line this year, and it's just like this could be the opportunity for us to get a little bit of synergy going and find a little bit of that form that we need. And this is just a backline that doesn't fill me with great trepidation about how we will go. And again, that'll come as we move through the lines, and midfield will probably be more of the discussion for our forward line I just look at their back line and just even though we're not your point from our review of the Collingwood game is important, that we need to find a focal point, but then the game plan is to be more dynamic. So it's a little bit of like what are we actually trying to achieve? And as we saw in the St Kilda game in the preseason, which again, St Kilda were terrible. So what we can read from that, but what we can see from that is like when we actually do move the ball the way we want to and get that movement in the forward line, we can find dynamic options and we don't have to key in on any one person. So I'm hoping we can maybe find a little bit more of that this year. And again, as you said, the introspection we would have had to have undertaken this week in the wake of the Collingwood game should speak to a lot more energy, I hope, this week. It's going to be a hot day because 29 degrees, the game starts at 3:45. The conditions are going to be
particularly at the start.
Yeah, the conditions are going to be a little bit testing for the players, but they got the yards in the legs last week, hopefully, and with a 7-day break again, almost to the game from last week's game, they're not coming off a short week or anything like that. So hopefully that there's no issues of tiredness from last week, and my forward line expectations. While, there's nothing from last week that actually makes me think our forward line will be terrible. It's just we just didn't get the delivery forward to them. But so I'm still reasonably excited for the prospects of what our forward line can do if we can get everything going behind them. So I don't know if that's where you sit with it, but there's not much more I have to say about them because I just don't have much data on them in my head for how they're going to function. But as far as
much like the moving Ken Hinkley on and letting Josh Carr take over after 1 week argument, it'd be similarly weak to just completely revamp the lineup. Although it is an interesting argument in the tool forward, or just another big presence in that line. It'll be interesting how the week unfolds in that regard. Now, Chad Corn's pretty much ruled out Ollie Lord in his conversation with Rowie and Tim Ginniver yesterday on Monday, 17th of March. So obviously, that would suggest that we're probably not going to get an Ollie Lord focal point. But like I mentioned as well, and I think I think a group of fans have also acknowledged that perhaps 2 rucks looked good in the preseason, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. I think Soldo actually performed quite well in the preseason. So his old side too, just as a side note, will they maybe pull the trigger on a 2 ruck system, providing a bit more height down back as well for one of them resting?
And because our thing last week was like, if we wanted to get the run going, then but last week we just didn't get it going anyway. So maybe just changing up the lineup slightly, particularly with Sweet getting gassed at the end of last week, maybe we do need to. And as you said, Sweet can get involved in some of the link-up play. Soldo, we liked the look of him last year until he got injured. I'm for it because it doesn't. It's just a slight, it's one magnet shift, and I think we've got enough running power around that anyway with some of the players.
That's it. And I mean, that's more from a midfield point of view, like the running power and the midfield presence from a ruck position. But having the two rucks does allow for one of them to rest forward and produce a focal point for those get out kicks that are prevalent in AFL matches. Again, we don't want that to be our entire forward identity, because by all accounts, we're moving on from that. A bit frustrating that it was our identity for so long, because I still think a Charlie Dixon could benefit from better delivery in the past. But just looking at last year's stats against Richmond, Sweet had 43 hitouts to Nankervis's 23. And then the chop outs were Samson Ryan and Charlie Dixon. So with 9 hitouts apiece. Don't know if Samson Ryan is in the squad for Richmond, but that's kind of irrelevant in this regard. It's more, will they be tempted to play the two rucks and have them rest forward to contribute to our forward mix? There'll be temptation to make change. There'll be pressure from outside to probably make change, but if they believe that the team that was listed on Saturday night against Collingwood is good enough, then I can imagine they'll probably want to show some stability in that regard as well. So the forward mix is interesting. I agree. I'm not dropping any of them. Berry may be at risk of maybe going to a sub just because he's junior, and being a small forward is tough. He came into the game, he came out of it, and if you're adding more forward power, someone has to go out. So it'll be interesting, but by and large, I'm not changing too much.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Just thinking, it was the Richmond game last year, the first one where was it someone like Soldo's family was in the rooms afterwards, just drunk, just being like, "This is what you lost. This is what you lost," or something like that.
Yes, yeah. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I remember seeing that.
So if that can happen again this week, I'm all for it. So that's what my point was going to be.
For sure.
If Soldo can play and have an impact, but it'll be interesting to see how that mix goes, because it as much as last week's game was good for Sweet, it's like, as you mentioned, that little moment where Finlayson was trying to come off, and the commentators even made mention of it in the game. Like, you don't see this very often. Players are just like trying to come off and they can't come off. Like, So it'd be.
But Finlayson looked fucking gassed himself, to be fair, but Sweet had just done a mountain of work.
Yeah, and that shows that, and Soldo, still does have a role to play, I think, this year. So it'd be interesting if it comes this week. To shake things up a bit, because Soldo early last year did kick a few nice goals, and we kind of like, if he can be goal scoring ruckman, and then Sweet has shown that he can kick goals pretty, like, you can trust him to kick a goal if he has a decent look. So
and you hit the nail on the head about Soldo. That, like, I think a lot of people were quite fond of his output. It was just predominantly the injuries that held him back last year, and provided Sweet with the opportunity to flourish, which he did.
Grabbed with both big port supporting hands of his.
Both claws.
I think the biggest question is with the forward line goes into the midfield. Like, what can the midfield produce this week? And clearly they should be. I mean, Tim Taranto is formidable opponent. As same with, like, Taranto and Hopper were the two guys they kind of got in that last trade burst to try to hold on to their dynasty back when Dimmer was still there, and they're still there, and Nankervis is a veteran presence as well. But beyond that, it's just like they're a test, but they're not. We're not talking the generation that the Collingwood got last week. All the things that Collingwood got to win the game last week, just Richmond don't possess. They have a few parts, but they don't have the game plan, nor do they have the run off halfback or anything like that, in the same way that obviously we just saw it was fucking Dan Houston. What this provides our midfield is a game that we can regroup and actually, show what. And again, some of the stats last week from our midfield weren't actually that bad. It was just an overall game plan thing. So that'll be the interesting thing there, how the game plan comes together. As we saw in the St Kilda game, I think we're a team that may at times is going to struggle against a better team this year if we're not quite on it on the day as we were against Collingwood. But the worst teams in the league that we're clearly better than, we should be beating as well, kind of like St Kilda
I agree.
in that preseason game as well. So Richmond again, I'm not besmirching. I don't want to be disrespectful or anything like that. They are coming off a big inspirational win, but Carlton gave that one away as well. Carlton got themselves in a position that they should not be losing that game.
Yeah, and they also kicked heavily inaccurately, 9 goals, 15. Carlton, that is. So
I have the X score from that game here, by the way. Richmond scored 81, expected 59. Carlton scored 67, expected 75. So on X score, Carlton win by 16 points. Like that's just how fucked that game was. So that speaks to kind of just they captured lightning in a bottle for a couple of quarters and won a game of football against the odds. You can't play. Your game plan can't be predicated on that. Like Carlton and
on a lightning in a bottle. Yeah, that's a good point.
You need to actually have some fundamentals. And I think what Port, obviously we got smashed off the park last week, but I just think what we have in totality is just far more than what Richmond has at the moment. All these players that they've got, like, the Sam Lawlers and the draft picks they've got in there might become that, Lawler.
Promising signs.
Comparisons and all that shit, like who knows. But at the moment, they're not that yet. And I think this is a chance for our midfield to rebound and actually, and for us to start actually showing this game plan can work for premiership points.
I agree. Yeah. Tommy Cochran, by all accounts, had a great game for the Magpies in their trial the other day, but I can't imagine any changes to our midfield. The midfield just needs to lift in their tackling pressure, but polish up their execution of disposal. That goes for the whole side, obviously, but the midfield play a big part in our fortunes, and they need to lift. They just need to add more polish. Round one's done. They've got another chance to get into their work against, a midfield with some key pillars, but you would expect our midfield to beat them, to put it simply.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's just like, we just should be wanting to exert dominance over a lesser side. Like, that's just what we need to actually, and that's all I was talking about at the end of the review and some of the Dan Houston stuff. But it's just like, we just need to have that hardness and just be like, we are this.
Yeah. Need a bit of a lift from Burgers. He got a bit lost at times, although he had his hands on the ball. Mead had patches during the Collingwood game that impressed me. Some patches where he'd like to improve on. So those are probably our weaker links, if you wanted to attribute that connotation. But I still have full faith in our midfield group that they can lift to another level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they should be doing that this week. Defensive line to finish off on. Tom Lynch probably there. Like, I like Ryan Mansell. Sam Lawler obviously had an incredible debut, swing and tackle and all. But Tom Lynch being out of there just is a massive loss.
Yeah, Tom Lynch being there straightens them up. Him not being there,
exactly, just
adds a bit of chaos to the mix, and not in the good way. So it'll be interesting. Nankervis will have to chip in. Oh, so in saying that though, I mentioned I'm not sure if Samson Ryan will be playing. He's the only kind of tool. That did he play last week?
No, he didn't. He was listed in emergencies last week, so he might play. He might be a chance to play this week.
I would imagine. He's one of their project tools. He's shown glimpses himself, so I would imagine he'd probably come in. He's a big bugger. Height wise, he's still on the slender side of height, but just what you're saying though. This forward line in comparison to Collingwood's forward line poses a significantly less of a threat. To be objective. It's not to slight Richmond and their forward line, but Collingwood's is obviously more proven.
And
And
they
they performed.
Tim Membry, like, who, you know, was just lost at St Kilda for a few years, although much loved at St Kilda, but
They let him go for nothing.
Mm-hmm. And I think St Kilda would still probably like to have Tim Membry. Like,
that is probably more confusing than the Dan Houston trade.
Yeah,
where we actually got something back for it. The Membry delisting, and therefore Collingwood picking him up as a delisted free agent just boggles the mind. It's basically gifting your opposition a leg up.
Yeah, and then Dan McStay and all those guys that were playing better than you got it's by comparison, like if Mason Cox is in Richmond's availability, like he's playing this week, whereas he's not.
Probably.
Yeah. Wasn't. Yeah. Because I think he was fit and available for Collingwood last week, but didn't play. So. Yeah.
So again, our defensive line does, like the midfield, like everything, they need to find another level. They need to add another layer of polish to their game, and keep an inexperienced forward line such as Richmond's honest, and keep them to a low score.
It's an interesting test for our back line being. We were just talking about Samson Ryan being, slender. It's like we're a more slender back line at the moment, courtesy of injury and height wise and everything like that. But
the interesting watch would be whether they pull Asava back into the fold. He's not on the injury list anymore. He had a run at it on Sunday in our Magpies trial. So, and that would, again, probably we're talking about forward line potential changes or potential non-changes. Say we bring Asava back in, he would go into the defence, and does that mean that Finlayson gets dropped, or does Finlayson go forward as that another tool option? Those are the kind of questions that they'll be asking in match committee, I'm sure, or discussing, because although Asava's shortcomings are highlighted or noted throughout the footy landscape, I do think his presence there would assist in kind of taking some pressure off Aaliyah. And then a Finlayson type not having to body up on some stronger forwards, which, granted, it looks like Richmond won't have anyway. But getting our structure right as we move into the early parts of the season is important.
Yeah, and probably actually if Asava is fit, we need to see how he's going to look. We need to know if that is going to be an option or not. So I mentioned it in one of our preseason shows. We got to the bye at 8-4 last year with him in the defensive mix. And he has a part to play. He just needs to improve. It's as simple as that. And it's a lot of between the ears moments like that. The goal that
sometimes
marked behind the line or whatever. Those little things. There's a lot of things he actually does pretty well. Like it's just, he had some moments. I think when I was going through the Sweeney / Wilson Gray nominations for last year, he popped up a couple of times. Like we highlighted some moments at times last year. Really impressed us. So he does have the ability. It's about like finding the consistency, and injury certainly didn't help him. And then
and decision making in some of those chaotic moments.
Yeah. And that he may never get past that, but if he can mitigate it enough to be a handy option for us, considering we are in need down the defensive end, then and a game like
we're all about it. We're all about a net positive.
Yeah, exactly.
And if him being there allows Aaliyah to perform better, and Miles Bergman and the like, then it's all about the net positive. We're not replacing Giambi. We all know that.
Yeah. Moneyball. It's the theory. It's the theme for this year. And I think the Richmond game, again, not to disrespect Richmond, but it provides an opportunity for an Asava if he is fit and ready to go, and if we do want to, try to get him into the mix, because he would have been in the mix, particularly once Zach Thatcher went down. Like
exactly right.
Asava, and then obviously he got an injury shortly after, so. Yeah, you've got to expect, and Finlayson's only played there because of the injuries to both of those people. So, yeah, I think that does raise the question of Finlayson. But no, who knows? How are you feeling overall? Like you're feeling pretty confident of win this week?
One thing about Port Adelaide is
I love asking that question. You just go starting with one thing about Port Adelaide, and it's just like, yeah. Anyway,
what's it going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. What I was going to say is that we are typically a good responding side. You go to the football, and more often than not, particularly in the last 5 years, we win games of football. I know we haven't won the big games of football, but this isn't a big game of football. This is round 2 against a regenerating young side in Richmond. And I mentioned earlier, we're a young side too, but we're a better side, in my opinion. We're at home for the first time this season, celebrating a milestone with Travis Boak. And again, just to contrast what I am saying, maybe milestone games aren't our forte either, but I would desperately hope that with the right attitude this week, we bounce back, because like I said, we have been a good responding team, and I would expect us to come out firing. And like I mentioned in the Collingwood game, a lot of what I saw today when I watched the replay is a lot of shit that can easily be fixed, and that's execution of disposal and decision making. So hopefully the ball is less slippery and the ground is less slippery, but I'm fairly confident overall. It's just frustrating that we have to respond in round 2. We're not used to it. We're generally accustomed to getting the season off and underway with a win in round 1, which didn't happen this time around. So
fairly good record of doing that usually. Yeah. The one anxiety that's hit me this week is the fact that back in 2022, we lost to Brisbane in a close game. And then we came back for the Russell Ebert tribute match and had one of the most disgusting performances against Hawthorn.
It's what I had in the back of my mind while I was giving my spiel just then I think I joked about it in the preseason about having a bit of a 2022 vibe coming into this season. And I don't want to manifest it into existence.
Yeah. So I'll do it instead. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you've, I've talked to you a bit about my Liverpool anxieties as we're comfortably in the lead of the Premier League. I still can't enjoy it because I've just got so much PTSD from previous years of playing some of the best football in the world and then still finishing second to Manchester City. So, there is a little bit. I just have sports anxiety all the time. So I haven't been able to get that out of my head. Is the fact that we're again coming into a home game after a humbling round 1 loss, even more humbling than the Brisbane one was. And there's a Russell Ebert tangent to it. It's just like, fuck off, universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, objectively, we should be winning this one. And I hope, unlike that Brisbane one, and this is where the caveat comes and where you can find your point of difference and realize that it's not the same thing ever. There's always a difference. The Brisbane one, we did perform admirably, had a lead in this third quarter. Injuries and conditions, we just ran out of legs because we actually had to, I think we only had 2 or 3 left I think we were on the bench. Yeah, we had some injuries and attrition in that game. And so we kind of had a little bit of like, oh, it's not our fault, and come back and beat Hawthorn, we'll be fine. This week we've been absolutely humbled. The pressure's on us. The players don't have the calmness of, we performed okay. None of them performed okay, or some of them did perform okay, as we've talked about, but overall as a group, they didn't perform anywhere close to okay. So there is a need for a tangible, heavy response against Richmond. So that's what fills me with hope, is that there's a bit of a kick up the arse that's come to them this week, which Chad Corns and Ken have already spoken to in their press moments. And that's where I come from a reasonable position of comfort that we will get the job done this week. Wish I could be there. I can't be there. This is the one home game of the year.
You mentioned that. Yeah.
I assume you're going to be there, being the...
I will. Yes, I will be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So anyone watching on YouTube, if you spot Jamie around, say good day and So you're a fan. If you're not watching,
Yeah, please
and you don't
do.
know what he looks like, then you can't do that. But if you're listening and you want to,
I may wear my prized WD-28 Willem Drew shirt. So
love that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
take a look out for that.
29 degree weather. It's perfect weather for it.
Well, there may actually be 4 Oliver men all wearing WD-28 shirts, but I don't want to lead the witness if they're listening.
If you actually do that, you need to get a photo. You need to do it like Chad and Kane did the photo in the gym this week that I posted. Yeah. You need to do like a photo like that. Obviously, you're gonna have sleeves on, but still,
just like the old Charlie Dixon, Chad Corns photo as well, but with shirts on.
Get the pythons out a little bit. Just bump them in the shirt.
Pull the sleeves up.
Yeah, the sun's gonna be shining. It's perfect weather for it.
True.
I love that. And I'm enjoying. I'm looking forward to getting back to Adelaide Oval this year and watching support footy. But I can't be there this week. Due to some helping out the family a little bit. So, but I'm looking forward to watching it on TV and reviewing it with you next week, and hopefully a far happier review than we've had to do this week. But as always, I found it therapeutic to talk it through with you. I like that
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that we can do this, and it certainly provides an outlet to do it therapeutically without just wallowing in self-pity and chewing. Just letting my mind rot over a result. I actually had to find a way in the preparing for the podcast to find a way to sin it, to just get it into a thought bubble that could be digestive for the viewers and listeners out there. So I'm glad I'm just always appreciative of this opportunity and thankful that you're here along for the ride with me, Jamie, as we it's round 1, disappointing loss, but onwards and upwards, and hopefully better things going forward, regardless of coaching situations or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. We'll be here. And for everyone listening and watching, obviously follow, subscribe, give a 5-star rating, whatever the positives are on any medium that you're digesting our content. Show us some love. It helps immensely. _the Creed on Twitter. _the Creed on Instagram. Go check out the link tree. Dave's got some merch up on the merch store and some more little nuggets of gold in the works. And as well as that, support us on Patreon. It costs more so, Dave, a fair chunk of cash to put this all together. Like we've mentioned, we're doing some team selection snippets throughout. Dave will be doing them every week. I'll be jumping on when I can. And we'll obviously try and make it worth your while. But yeah, that's my little spiel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you being much better at selling the product than I can. Massive. And again, massive appreciation for Jamie being along for the ride. My last message, and it's just something I wanted to say, it sucks weeks like the last week we've been through as a club, but Port Adelaide Football Club has been here for 155 years now. It's going to endure through everything, regardless of coaching situations, players leaving, coming, going, whatever it may be. As in your background, again, for those watching on YouTube, you'll see it. But Russell Ebert in those, is there. Travis Spoke's there. 2 players that between them have almost 800 games between them. We're going to have many more of those blokes along the way. Port Adelaide Football Club will endure and be great forevermore. We're already one of the most storied clubs in world sports history, and it will continue on regardless of the trials and tribulations that it currently feel like the world is ending at times. The Port Adelaide Football Club has endured many things and will continue to do that, and success will be in our future, no matter what. So that's what's calmed me throughout the last couple of days, and long may the Port Adelaide Football Club continue.
Yeah, wouldn't have it any other way. Well put.
Yep. Up the fucking pair. We'll see you next week.
Go Port. Come on.